Chapter 636. How about I be your father? If it was 3 to 5 days ago, anyone who dared to speak to Bai Zhenming in such a manner would have long been beaten to a pulp by the mighty Bai family head. But humans were a very despicable creature. Not to mention being his son, he had even been a grandson before. At that time, it was his own father who forced him to acknowledge him as his father, causing him to become a grandson as well. But his performance these past 2 days could only be described as flattering and fawning. Everything else aside, Bai Zhenming had personally taken care of Sun Lang's treatment and arrangements. From the number of people to serve him, to the 3 meals, and even the various resources that were provided, everything was reviewed and decided by Bai Zhenming himself. It was likely that even if the emperor himself came here, he would not be so attentive. His performance was already no different from an actual grandson. So, when he heard Sun Lang's words, Bai Zhenming could only smile bitterly. "Marshal, please don't joke around. I am such a useless, mediocre person. How can I be worthy of being your son?" Sun Lang rolled his eyes and said, "What are you thinking? I'm talking to you about serious business." Bai Zhenming was startled at first, but then he quickly reacted and said in surprise, "You mean you want to pretend to be my father and deal with those martial artists?" Sun Lang nodded and said, "Yes, for now. This is the only way. Your father is unconscious, and even if he wakes up, he will be a retard. How can he deal with those sly Jianghu people?" Bai Zhenming's face showed a difficult expression. How should he put it? That was his real father. Letting Sun Lang pretend to be Bai Yue as his son, he felt very uncomfortable. A long time ago, he had learned about this young Grand Marshal's strange personality from his casual conversations with his father. And after interacting with this person for the past 2 days, his previous impression was confirmed. What he was most worried about now was that this fellow was pretending to be his father. What if he got up to and messed around with him when the time came? Sun Lang glared at him and said, "What kind of expression is that? Are you suspecting that I will use my identity as your father to stir up trouble and ruin the reputation of your Bai family?" Cold sweat trickled down Bai Zhenming's face as he laughed dryly. "How could that be? How could that be? It's just that I'm a little apologetic, Sun Lang nodded. "Is that so? At least you have some conscience. You know how difficult it was for me to make this decision. After all, as a grandmaster, I have my own dignity and perseverance. Do you understand the bearing of a grandmaster?" Everything was open and above board. Everything was open and above board. He never played tricks or underhanded tricks. "Today, for the sake of your Bai clan, I am willing to lower myself to play the role of your father. I am truly giving you a lot of face." "Tui," Bai Zhenming cursed in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He instinctively felt uneasy about Sun Lang's bold proposal. But you don't look like it." Among the people, the so-called disguise technique was said to be miraculous. In the mouths of storytellers, this mysterious and terrifying technique was simply the most impossible to guard against in the world. A human skin mask could completely turn you into someone else. In the blink of an eye, you could appear in front of the world with a different face. It was simply a must-have item for traveling, killing, and arson. However, as the head of an aristocratic family, Bai Zhenming knew that this kind of miraculous technique didn't exist at all. The so-called disguise technique did exist in this world, but it wasn't as miraculous as the legend said. At best, it was through wearing a wig, pasting on a beard, turning eyelids, and adding a black mole. It could be used to disguise a person as another person for a short period of time to achieve the purpose of stealth. This kind of knowledge could be considered extensive and profound, but it didn't include perfectly imitating another person. At most, it could only be used to try to pass off the fake as the real thing. From afar, it might be able to fool people a little, but from a closer look, it couldn't fool people at all. The reason was simple: materials. Every person was unique, and every face was also unique. It was the secret of the birth of life, the highest masterpiece of the Creator. To perfectly imitate, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Moreover, although the world was big, it was impossible to find a material that could perfectly fit the human body and make the so-called human skin mask vivid. Moreover, the muscles and bones of a person's face had already been fixed. It was easier said than done to change it. Therefore, Sun Lang wanted to pretend to be Bai Yue. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Not to mention other things, just the difference in their figures was too great. Bai Zhenming expressed his worries and thoughts, and Sun Lang laughed. "This isn't difficult," Sun Lang said. "Your father has been living in seclusion for the past 2 years. I guess he hasn't seen any outsiders. Who knows if he's gained weight or lost weight. As for my appearance, this is indeed a problem. After all, I am much more handsome than your father. No makeup or disguise technique can completely cover up my handsomeness, which is enough to make heaven and earth pale in comparison. It is very easy to be exposed." There was a suppressed chuckle outside the door. Without even thinking, it must be that little fairy. Sun Lang's expression didn't change. He continued, "But this doesn't matter. The key to the problem is not this. The impression that outsiders have of your father doesn't lie in his appearance. In their eyes, your father is an elder of 3 dynasties, a hero of Tianyuan, and the gold radiant sword sage. He is one of the most powerful grandmasters in the world. So the key to the problem lies in this. Do you understand what I mean?" Bai Zhenming's expression changed. Yes, Sun Lang's kung fu was definitely good enough to pretend to be his father. He could even use his kung fu cultivation to gain the upper hand and make up for many mistakes. Sun Lang nodded and said, "So, that's it. People can be impersonated, but not kung fu. No matter how hard those Jianghu people think, they will never think that you can find someone who is better at kung fu than your father to pretend to be your father. Therefore, the gold radiant sword sage Bai Yue is cultivating at home and doesn't care about worldly affairs. The Huaichuan incident is definitely a false accusation." Master Bai thought for a moment and said, "You mean that you won't show up directly, but will show your kung fu to scare them off?" Sun Lang said, "Of course. After all, what kind of status does your father have? How can they see him just because they want to? When the time comes, you just need to shout a few times and send out a few sword chi to scare them. After all, they didn't have any real evidence before coming here. They are already in the wrong. Since Bai Yue has already denied it, they won't dare to pester you to the end." Bai Zhenming thought for a moment and found that this whimsical plan was actually feasible. He couldn't help but be a little tempted. Well, if he didn't show up directly but used telepathy, there wouldn't be any risk for him to pretend to be his father. After all, he only relied on his mouth. No matter how good he was at talking, how big a storm could he cause? Bai Zhenming thought for a while and couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This may work. I have to go back and think about it and perfect the plan. But Marshal, my father, Sun Lang waved his hand and said, "You are really close. You miss him so much after not seeing him for a day. Let's go. I'll let you see him again." Bai Zhenming's eyes dimmed, and he said softly, "Yes." At this point, if he wanted to visit his father as a son, he had to get permission from the other party. It had come to this. Bai Zhenming and Sun Lang went out of the door. The little fairy was shocked and hurriedly moved to the side. When she saw Sun Lang looking at her, she instinctively stood at attention and said, I'm not eavesdropping. You didn't even close the door. You can hear it if you come over." Sun Lang looked at her and said, "When we were buzzing, we didn't close the door." The little fairy tilted her head and said, "Buzzing? What is that?" The B*TCH personality said in the spiritual world, "Don't worry about it. He often says some strange things that no one can understand. It's been like this in the past." At first, everyone would be curious and ask him, but then he would excitedly pull you aside and explain to you. After that, he would bring out at least 5 things that you don't understand. So later, even Zhao Yunlong just listened and didn't ask. Xia Wei was stunned and said, "Then isn't he very lonely?" The sword spirit was startled and then said lightly, "So what if he is? He doesn't want to give up. It's useless no matter who comes." Xia Wei was stunned again. She looked at Sun Lang and Bai Zhenming's backs and thought for a moment. Then she immediately followed them. "Hey, what are you doing? I'm a little curious. He seems to have a lot of stories." Of course, What he has experienced in the past 8 years is something that a stupid girl like you can't imagine in 10 lifetimes. But are you sure you're curious about him? What's wrong? It's normal to be curious about strange things that you haven't seen before. I advise you to stay away from him. If a soft-hearted and old-fashioned guy like you knows about that, what? Nothing. If you want to die, then follow them. Be careful not to fall into his bed. Sister Lou, what are you talking about? He is my enemy who killed my brother. This will never change. How can I and him? What are you snorting about? While bickering with the sword spirit, the little fairy followed them. The place where Bai Yue was imprisoned was in another wing of the courtyard. It was so close that Sun Lang could blast the sword chi that could tear the world apart in a second. It was a safe distance. There was no one guarding this place, but there was a cold feeling that made people's hair stand on end. It was as sharp as the edge of a sword. Bai Jiming knew what was going on. That day, Sun Lang casually found some bedding and spread it on the ground. Then, he put his father on it. Then he took a long candlestick in front of him and rubbed it into an iron rod. After that, he drew a circle around his father with the iron rod. Then, the surroundings became Sanran with the sword chi. He still clearly remembered Sun Lang's smile at that time, very cunning and annoying, as if he had done something bad. Chapter 637. Bai Jiming saw his father once more. Of course, his father was still unconscious. For 2 whole days, he had been lying there without food or drink. Fortunately, he knew that his father's martial arts were astonishing and profound, so it wouldn't be a problem for him to not eat or drink for a short period of time. Moreover, Bai Jiming also had some medical knowledge and decent martial arts. After taking his father's pulse, he found that his father's pulse was still vigorous, completely unaffected. Thus, Bai Jiming wasn't too worried. After all, the Bai clan was facing too many problems. Sun Lang's saber was hanging over the Bai clan fort. The imperial court sword was also ready to strike. The Huichuan incident had been exposed, heroes had gathered in Qin province, and the shadow of the imperial court was behind it. The mysterious Tensei province was looming, and there was also the enmity between Sun Lang and his father, the enmity between Sun Lang and the imperial court, and the issue of which side the Bai clan should take. Compared to these life-threatening problems, the fact that his father was in a coma was simply a trivial matter. Bai Jiming sighed and knelt on the ground. He tidied up his father's blanket and smoothed out his hair. The omnipotent and awe-inspiring father in his memories was now lying on the cold ground, unconscious. Even his own life was not in his own hands. The enemies behind him could kill him at any time. If he woke up, he would also fight Sun Lang to the death. No one knew his son better than his father. He knew his father's character and conduct all too well. Every time he thought of the difficulties, Bai Jiming couldn't help but feel sad. This burden was too heavy. Even though he was almost at the age of knowing his destiny, he couldn't help but feel a burst of confusion. He didn't know what the future would hold, how the Bai clan would survive this disaster, and what his father would end up like. As he pondered in a daze, tears began to fall from Bai Jiming's eyes. Sun Lang and Xie Wei stood at the door, watching Bai Jiming kneel on the ground and gently tidy up his father's quilt. They suddenly noticed that in just 2 or 3 days, Bai Jiming's hair had already turned white. 2 years of worry had turned into an unbearable burden in just 2 or 3 days, and all of it had pressed down on his body. There was no one he could confide in. Even his wife, who shared a bed with him and helped him through thick and thin, did not dare to reveal anything. His father's life, his family's inheritance, and the entire Bai family's life all rested on his shoulders. This heavy burden could dye his hair white in a single night. The little minx's eyes turned red. She was a very kind person, and with her horned tiger's ability, she could easily read people's emotions. Just by looking at Bai Jiming's back, she could feel his loss and sadness. Her whole person became sad, and she couldn't help but glare at Sun Lang. Although she didn't say anything, the meaning behind her words was obvious. You're too much. Sun Lang felt her gaze, but he only shook his head slightly. His face was expressionless and unmoved. Xie Wei's heart suddenly surged with anger. Was this person's heart made of iron? Apart from hatred, was there nothing in this world that could move him? At this time, Bai Zhiming slowly got up. He first wiped his tears with his sleeve, then turned around and bowed shyly. "I've let the two of you see a joke," Sun Lang said. "I thought that if your father woke up, the first thing he would do was to beat you up, but now it seems that he might not." Bai Zhiming smiled. He glanced at his father again and said softly, "He hasn't hit me for a long time. If he can wake up now, it doesn't matter if I let him beat me a few more times," Sun Lang said calmly. "He will wake up?" Bai Zhiming looked at Sun Lang in surprise, then bowed and said, "Then I'll rely on the marshal. I have to arrange to deal with those martial artists. The marshal wants to pretend to be my father, but I have to think about the specific details. After all, if the imperial court is behind all this, I'm afraid they won't let it go." Sun Lang nodded. "You can go. I'll take a look at your father's situation." Bai Zhiming excused himself, glanced at his father one last time, and then strode away. Sun Lang snorted and stepped through the door. He crouched down and pressed his hand on Bai Yue's shoulder, as if he was sensing something with his eyes closed. Xia Wei had just broken free from this sorrowful mood. Seeing Sun Lang like this, she was first startled, and then she mysteriously asked, "Why don't you kick him?" She remembered that 2 days ago, when Sun Lang was examining the changes in the sword chi in Bai Yue's body, he had directly kicked him, venting his anger and examining him at the same time. He had spoken eloquently and righteously, not delaying the matter at all. Sun Lang indifferently said, "My feet hurt." Seeing him like this, the little fairy suddenly burst into laughter. "You could be a little more frank usually. You don't look like a bad person." Sun Lang didn't even raise his head. "Is that so?" In Bai Yue's eyes, "I'm the main culprit who caused his father to become like this and threaten the lives of his entire family. And there's no need to talk about Bai Yue. You've seen how he looks when he's crazy. I can tell you that when he's awake, his hatred and killing intent towards me are 3 times stronger than before. Don't I look like a bad person?" The little fairy was startled at first, and then she sadly said, "I don't understand. You humans are always attacking each other for various reasons. When I was studying in the mountains, I read your history books with my teacher. Almost half of the book was about killing people, and the other half was about the reasons for killing people. At that time, I felt that humans were very cruel, but after going down the mountain, I realized that the world is much crueler than I thought," Sun Lang said. "The world is like this, full of lies and falsehoods. Cruel killing is the most real reality. You shouldn't have gone down the mountain." The little fairy glanced at him and sighed. "But I have a reason to go down the mountain." Sun Lang poured internal energy into his fingers to check the changes in Bai Yue's body. He casually asked, "Is it revenge?" The story is written like this. The protagonist is taught by a group of experts in the mountains. When he became an adult, he learned about his past and the hatred he bore, so he went down the mountain to seek revenge. Then he happened to meet a young lady who was looking for a thug, so he immediately put aside his feud and became a bodyguard. What kind of story is this? But it's true that the plot in the story can't be believed. Xia Wei shook his head and smiled, a rare sadness appearing in his beautiful eyes. "Who knew that I would meet you like this?" Sun Lang snorted. "Isn't this your good fortune? That bitch with her extremely crooked 3 views will definitely lead you astray. Only I, the life mentor, can lead you to the right path." The little fairy just shook her head and leaned against the door. She looked at Sun Lang and sighed softly. Sun Lang stopped and frowned. "Do you have something on your mind?" "You can say that," Xia Wei murmured. "I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what I'm doing." Sun Lang thought about it for a moment, but his back was still facing Xia Wei as he said, "Now that I think about it, that's indeed the case. You seem to have been inexplicably dragged into this matter and followed me to the Bai family fort in a daze. It's normal for you to feel confused and at a loss for what to do. I apologize for not considering your thoughts." The little fairy was flattered. This guy actually knows how to apologize, and his tone is so normal. She immediately said, No need. In fact, I also want to follow you temporarily. After all, you killed my brother. I have to ask you for an explanation and even take revenge." I'm taking this opportunity to investigate the enemy. Sun Lang waved his hand and said, well, I know you have a good heart, but that's one thing. In addition, I have to admit that this time, I came not only for Jidu, but also for you. There's something I want you to help me with, so I can't let you go now. I'll tell you in detail after I'm done with Bai Yue. The little fairy curiously asked, what is it? It's something that's hard to talk about. Sun Lang said, it's related to my marriage. The little fairy was shocked. Her face immediately turned red. She straightened her body and said loudly, it's impossible between us. Sun Lang looked back with a speechless face. I didn't know that a serious little fairy like you also has a soft and dreamy girl's heart. Xia Wei's face turned even redder. She jumped and said, did you deliberately say it so ambiguously? Sun Lang rolled his eyes and said, if I continue to flirt with you, I'm afraid I'll be chopped into a dozen pieces and carried away. Young lady, what are you thinking all day? Let's not talk about other things, but you should at least consider reproductive isolation. Although I don't have any discrimination against you demons, I still find it very strange. That's why I admire Su Xian for being a man. She's really a hero from the grass. Xia Wei was puzzled. Reproductive isolation? Sun Lang sighed. Your adolescent education is very poor. Come, you see, you're a monster and I'm a human. If we get married and have children, what will the children be? Even if we don't have a son, it's still terrible. You see, if we have sex, you'll be so happy that you can't control yourself. Then you'll turn back to your original form. Oh my God, it's really... The little fairy blushed and said angrily, the human form is so convenient. Who would turn back to their original form for no reason? It's big and hard to clean up. Also, who wants to have sex with you? Sun Lang just smiled. Then he seemed to think of something and said casually, speaking of which, I still don't know what your original form is. What kind of monster are you? Xia Wei was shocked and said in a panic, This. Sun Lang looked at her sideways. What, you can't say it. Is it some kind of race that you can't talk about? Xia Wei was originally flustered, but when she heard this, she immediately said, Teacher said that I can't reveal this kind of thing to others. And even if I tell you, you won't know? Sun Lang snorted. I'm not bragging, but I've seen a lot of monsters in the past. A light flashed in Xia Wei's mind. Strangely, she suppressed her wildly beating heart and tried to sound as calm as possible. Slowly she said, Oh, what kind of monsters have you seen? Chapter 638. Oh, what kind of monsters have you seen before? The little minx tried to make her tone as calm as possible, but her heartbeat was already uncontrollably speeding up. Sun Lang snorted and proudly said, That's a lot. The monsters in the world are divided into categories and categories. There are so many of them. How can I count them one by one? When the little minx heard this, she immediately felt a sense of, wow, he knows a lot. Then she heard the bitch personality sigh. It's starting again. Xia Wei didn't know what was going on. He blinked and asked, For example? Sun Lang raised a finger. Have you heard of the Gap, old woman? The little minx shook her head blankly. Ignorant and inexperienced. Sun Lang sighed. All right, since ancient times, there have been dead creatures that have absorbed the spiritual energy of the world over the years and turned into spirits. For example, those ship spirits that roam the internet and cheat the nerds of their money. You've heard of this before, right? Xia Wei stared and said, Ships can become monsters? Also, what is the internet? Wow, you're really a country girl. Sun Lang sighed. Young man, you still have to study more. Don't you feel ashamed that your knowledge is so shallow? Xia Wei said angrily. Are you trying to scare me? What Gap, old woman? What kind of name is that? And what ship monster? How can a ship become a monster? Why can't a ship become a monster? Guns can become a monster. Swords can become a monster. Even shit can become a monster. Sun Lang squinted and said, Also, pay attention to what you say. This Gap old woman is a great person. The word Gap refers to her skills and means. The word old woman refers to her characteristics. The little demoness was unconvinced and said, She's a child and a grandmother. Could it be that she's an old woman in her teens? Sun Lang said excitedly, That's right. You're such a clever child. You should really be slapped to the keyboard. Why did I get slapped? What's a keyboard? I don't understand anything at all. In any case, the little demoness had played a trick. She wanted to ask about the horned tiger as if nothing had happened. If she could use the identity of an outsider to entice Sun Lang to talk about her elder brother, and then casually probe him to understand the cause and effect, that would also be good. Who would have thought that Sun Lang would not take the bait? Instead, he said some random things that she had never heard of before. Therefore, she took it for granted that Sun Lang was being perfunctory. Xia Wei was dissatisfied. I've never heard of such a name before. Can't you say something I can understand? For example. Like what? He couldn't just mention the horned tiger, could he? In that case, he would be exposed immediately. Xia Wei suddenly thought of the rude and overbearing monster prince who was torn apart in the blink of an eye. For example, that ancient sculpture. You've seen his body, right? Sun Lang was shocked. Oh, if you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. The child body was still buried by me. I didn't have time to harvest it. It's full of material. The little demoness looked at him coldly. She even used provocation. You're trying to change the topic. Are you saying that you don't know anything and can only fabricate things that I don't know to fool me? Unfortunately, Sun Lang was used to bickering with people over the years. Provocation was a low-level skill that could not break through his defense. He said, "Wow, I grew up listening to stories about monsters when I was a child. What Chinese ghost story, Legend of the White Snake, Ying Ning, Journey to the West, and a lot of other stories." Xia Wei was at the age where she was naive and full of curiosity about everything. Although she was depressed at this time, Sun Lang's tone was too casual and relaxed. She couldn't help but feel bitter and resentful. Hearing the names of the stories from his mouth, she was a little curious. Then what are those stories? This. Sun Lang summed it up and said, the ones in front are about how to deal with monsters, and the ones in the back are about how to kill monsters. There are only these two types of human legends about monsters. Xia Wei's face turned red again. She said angrily, why are you teasing me all day? I'm talking to you about something serious. Sun Lang said inexplicably, what is it? Weren't we talking about your race before? Aren't we just chatting? So the topic had unknowingly deviated to this point. For a moment, the little minx's mood was extremely complicated. She looked at Sun Lang and didn't know where to start. She didn't know how to say it. Only now did she feel that the world was so complicated and changeable. It was countless times more complicated than the world in the mountains. She couldn't say what she wanted to say directly, but she had to consider all kinds of consequences if she wanted to do something. She could have straightforwardly made everything clear and asked Sun Lang. But what about after asking? What should she do? What should she do next? If he wanted an answer, he just wanted peace of mind. But what should he do after peace of mind? And what if his answer couldn't make her feel at ease? The more Xia Wei thought about it, the more wronged she felt and the angrier she became. She looked at Sun Lang's hateful face and wanted to get angry. But her reason told her that there was no reason to get angry. The more this simple little girl thought about it, the more tangled she became. She angrily stomped her feet, turned around, and ran away, leaving behind a soul-stirring roar. You annoying brat. Sun Lang was shocked. He didn't know why this little monster was angry. In the blink of an eye, the girl had already run far away. From afar, he could see her long braids swinging behind her. What's wrong with me? Sun Lang touched his head. Ant came? Wait, monsters also have ants? In the blink of an eye, the girl who was chatting and laughing suddenly had an emotional outburst, showing all kinds of incomprehensible, abnormal behaviors. For example, she would be depressed for no reason, or she would cry for no reason. It was completely baffling. This was probably one of the few racial problems that had plagued men throughout human history. Girls were really too complicated. He wanted to ask B*TCH about it, but unfortunately, B*TCH was hanging on Xia Wei's body today. Naturally, she ran away with Xia Wei, so he couldn't ask. Sun Lang thought for a long time. Suddenly, a light flashed in his mind. It was like Conan had finally discovered the only truth. With a shocked face, he said, "Could it be that she likes me?" It seemed that this was the only reason that could explain it. Sun Lang, who had fallen into one of the three major illusions of life, squatted on the ground and thought hard. It seemed that he could indeed explain all the abnormalities and changes. This guy's behavior in the past 2 days was very abnormal. He often stole glances at me and always talked about this and that in front of me, trying to find topics to talk about. After I casually teased him, even if he got angry at the time, he would still come up to me as if nothing had happened. He still wanted to talk to me. If he wasn't interested in me, why would he be so persistent? Also, she always talks about monsters as if nothing had happened. She must be hinting at something. Is she hesitating? Is she hesitating about my opinion of monsters? And these days, she seems to have a lot on her mind. She often sits alone in a daze. I don't know what she is thinking. Ayaya, the feeling of a girl falling into a sour and sweet first love. Sun Lang, who was squatting on the ground, made a series of strange laughter. He slapped Bai Yue's head and showed an embarrassed smile. Don't say that, old man Bai. Although my charm is amazing, there are already people who like me. Yes, I'm so handsome. There are so many people in the world who like me. Do I have to respond to their feelings? He thought for a while and let out an even more creepy laugh. Then Sun Lang hit Bai Yue's head with Tian Shan, 6 yang palms again, and said with a smile, "Am happy? No, no, no. How can you accuse someone without any basis? Old man, I'm distressed. I'm hesitating. I don't want to hurt the innocent heart of the young girl. Forget it. You won't be able to understand my distress in this lifetime, right? I won't lower myself to your level." Sun Lang sighed for a while, just like Xian Shiji, who wrote, "If you slap the railing, no one will touch you." Because of his unfulfilled ambition and depression, he was also distressed about how to deal with the young girl's feelings. He slapped old Bai's head again with heart-destroying palm. Unfortunately, no one knew his distress. After that, he sighed again. Alas, do I have to make the girl cry again? I'm really a sinful man. Damn it, why is it wet? Sun Lang suddenly felt that his palm was a little strange. He raised his hand in surprise and found that there were some water stains on his palm, as if he had accidentally touched a girl. He was startled. What the F***CK? He looked down and saw that Bai Yue was staring at him. His big eyes were misty and full of grievances. He dared to be angry, but didn't dare to say anything. And the water stain on Sun Lang's hand came from Bai Yue's face. This guy didn't make a sound just now, but his tears had already turned into 2 rivers flowing out. Oh, fortunately, there was no snot on it. It was so F***king disgusting. Sun Lang wiped his hand on Bai Yue's clothes and then realized that something seemed to be wrong. The two looked at each other. Sun Lang looked at Bai Yue's face and seemed to realize something. Wait, you F***king. Bai Yue looked at him with shock and fear in his eyes. His expression was the same. As if he had seen a big tiger, he tightly pursed his lips as if he was holding back something. But his expression, his perseverance, his strong forbearance was gradually collapsing. Hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. I can't hold it in. Bai Yue opened his mouth wide and closed his eyes. The next moment, an earth-shattering cry sounded. Wah. Chapter 639. The Bai family castle had been in business for more than 10 generations. Coupled with its rapid development in recent years, it could be said that it was constantly changing. Nowadays, the Bai clan's castle stretched out into the distance and covered a vast expanse of land. Rather than calling a castle, it would be better to call a small town. The Bai clan was a collective of clans that were tied together by genealogy, bloodline, and interests. From the inside to the outside, the Bai clan had gathered together in a strict hierarchy, forming a firm community of common interests. In addition, the branches of the Bai clan were scattered all over the Qin province. Like a myriad of stars surrounding the moon, the Bai clan's roots were implanted into the deepest part of the land. This was the ideal situation for an aristocratic family. Currently, the place where Sun Lang and Xia Wei were temporarily staying was the core area of the Bai family fort. The environment here was beautiful, and the scenery was breathtaking. The outside was surrounded by layers upon layers of buildings, and it was obvious that this was the most prestigious area of the Bai family fort. Only the legendary old ancestor had the qualifications to live here. This was the holy land in the hearts of the Bai family disciples. Since it was the residence of the old ancestor, it naturally had many advantages. First of all, the place was big. Second, the scenery was good. Third, it was quiet. Moreover, Bai Zhenming paid special attention to it and gave strict orders to make the core area even more deserted. No one dared to wander around here. Xiaowei had lost her temper earlier. She rushed out of the door without caring about the direction. She just kept running around. She wandered around the beautiful garden path for a while and came to peach forest. She leaned against a peach tree and panted a few times. However, her mood became more and more agitated. She simply wanted to shout out loud. But slowly, tears fell from the little fairy's eyes. Her tears fell into the soil under her feet and sank in an instant. The B*TCH said lightly, "I tried to stop you, but you didn't listen. Fortunately, you ran away at the last moment. Otherwise, if Sun Lang really talked about the horned tiger as you think, with your acting skills and shrewdness, how could you hide it from his eyes? He would have seen through your connection with the horned tiger at a glance. Once he makes this connection, you can forget about hiding anything from him." Xiao Wei whimpered, "If I can't hide it from him, then I can't hide it from him. At worst, I can't hide it from him." The sword spirit sighed. "What are you talking about? There's something very wrong with your current situation." The little fairy leaned her head against the branch of the peach tree. As she wiped her tears, she said, "I just feel very tired. Sister Lu, I even want to give up on revenge. I don't care about this matter anymore. I want to go home immediately. I want to go back to the mountains immediately. The world outside the mountains is really too complicated. I have to think about this and that." The B*TCH said indifferently, "Have you thought it through? Let's go now." Xiao Wei was startled at first. Then he shook his head and said, "No. Doesn't Sister Lu want to become a human again?" The sword spirit said, "I don't have to hide it from you. I really want to be a human again. Sun Lang doesn't do business at a loss. Since he threw out this bait, it means that he expects me to work for him. You don't want to be separated from me. So can you always stay by Sun Lang's side and work for him? You can't hold it in any more today. If this goes on, how much longer can you endure?" The little fairy stammered, I can talk to him directly." The B*TCH bluntly exposed her perfunctory words. "Talk? After telling the truth, what kind of answer do you expect from Sun Lang? What kind of answer can make you, his sister, work for the enemy who killed your brother with a clear conscience? Once this window paper is exposed, with Sun Lang's suspicious temperament, he will definitely be on guard against you. You should know that, right?" The little fairy thought about it and agreed. So she cried even more sadly, This annoying person, why did he kill my brother?" The sword spirit sighed. She hesitated for a moment and said, Maybe, my previous judgment about Sun Lang may be a little biased. You have also been in contact with Sun Lang these 2 days. What do you think of his character?" Xiao Wei sobbed and wiped his tears. He curled his lips and said, "Annoying person." The sword spirit was speechless. "Don't say it like a spoiled child. What else? For example, in terms of dealing with people." The little fairy thought for a moment, and Sun Lang's hateful face immediately appeared in her mind. His words and deeds these days flashed like flowing water. So Xiao Wei snorted, "Arrogant, willful, stubborn, and doesn't listen to people." The B*TCH nodded and said, "That's right. So, do you think that such an arrogant person is the kind of person who will kill people at will?" Xiao Wei hesitated and said, "He was very fierce to old Master Bai. If it weren't for old Master Bai's invulnerability, I'm afraid he would have been killed by him. That's because the two of them have a grudge. You have seen it. Not only does Sun Lang hate Bai Yue, but Bai Yue also hates him to death. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, this matter can't be blamed on Sun Lang." The sword spirit sighed in a low voice. "In short, with Sun Lang's temper, he won't kill people casually. You should think so too, right?" Xiao Wei thought for a moment, and then slowly nodded. "Yes, although I don't agree with many of his practices, my intuition tells me that he is not that kind of heinous villain." He is even much better than those people we have seen before. As soon as those people saw me, they were thinking about how to get you from me. And then to me, when she said this, she looked a little bashful. As a girl who didn't know much about the world, her trip down the mountain was an eye-opener. With the mind-reading ability of a horned tiger tribe, she could see through many people's treacherous hearts at a glance. Naturally, she also understood how sinister people's hearts were. Compared with those sanctimonious and insatiable human beings, Sun Lang was actually a little cute. At the very least, even if he was plotting something against Ji Du, he would say it openly and not use tricks to steal it. Not to mention other things, his martial arts were so high that if he wanted to steal the sword, he could kill Ji Du with one finger. Therefore, Xie Wei sighed. Indeed, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would kill people casually. The B***TCH hesitated for a moment and slowly said, "So, your brother's death." The little minx reacted. She widened her eyes and said, "Sister Lu, you mean my brother?" The sword spirit sighed. "As far as I know about Sun Lang, he won't kill people for no reason. In other words, he must have killed your brother for a reason." Xie Wei shook her head and said, "I know. He must have a reason to kill my brother, but no matter what the reason is, he killed my brother after all." The B***TCH said, "This is different, Xie Wei. Let me make an assumption. I mean, if, you see, you and your brother were separated from each other when you were young. You were raised by your teachers in the 100,000 Mountains. They taught you to be a rigid and weak. Oh no, an upright and kind girl. But your brother may not have this opportunity. He was wandering outside and fell into the hands of someone with ulterior motives. Maybe he would be." The little minx was shocked and hurriedly said, "Sister Lu, I mean if." And Xie Wei, you know in your heart that the probability is not small. After all, you have seen how dirty the outside world is. The sword spirit slowly said, "You have to admit that there is such a possibility. If your elder brother had really become an evil monster and had fallen into Sun Lang's hands because he had done something bad, would you still want to take revenge?" Xie Wei was stunned for a while and suddenly shook her head. This was a possibility she didn't want to consider. She couldn't imagine that her brother, whom she had never met, was an evil person. No, this is impossible. Teacher said that our Horned Tiger clan can see through people's hearts. We are auspicious beasts that judge crimes. How do we go down the evil path? Maybe, but the world is unpredictable. People's hearts are fickle. No matter how upright and pure a soul is, it will be stained with darkness because of some things. The sword spirit sighed softly. You said that Sun Lang was too willful. Do you know how open and upright he was before? He was the reincarnation of a saint in the hearts of thousands of soldiers. But in the end, didn't he become like this? The little minx was surprised. Him? Open and kind? Open and upright? Sister Lu, you're not joking, are you? I'm not joking. The sword spirit and Lu Shujin were originally one. The two personalities shared the memories of the past. Master Lu was one of the first people to know Sun Lang. He was also one of the people who knew Sun Lang's origins and secrets. He was also one of the people who watched Sun Lang walk to the top step by step. She would never forget the memories of that person. Therefore, she said softly, "You think you have a clear conscience and are upright and magnanimous, but compared to Sun Lang's kindness, your kindness is like the difference between the clouds and mud. True kindness is benevolence and forgiveness, universal love and compassion. He did it. So many people were attracted to him and couldn't help but be convinced by him and admire him." The little minx said blankly, "Sister Lu, I don't understand." The sword spirit laughed self-deprecatingly. "It's normal because I have never understood this person. I don't know what he is thinking." Xie Wei blinked. He didn't cry anymore, but he didn't know how to answer. After a long while, the sword spirit continued, "Why am I telling you this? You can't find out the cause of your brother's death because you can't find anything to talk about. But I have a friendship with him, so it shouldn't be difficult to get information out of him. I didn't help you before because I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to accept the answer for a while. But now it seems that this matter is no longer something you can solve by yourself." Then she said, "Well, I'll talk to him tonight." Xie Wei heard this and panicked. "Sister Lu, well, little girl, You have to know. Before you can't help but mess things up, let me help you find out. There's a hint of meaning in the words of the bitch personality. Do you remember that Empress Tensei mentioned your brother before? I have a hunch that maybe your brother's death and the reason why Sun Lang killed him are all related to this princess. Sister Lu, I still don't understand. Then do you believe me? Of course I believe you. Sister Lu is very good to me. Then you don't have to worry about it. Leave everything to me. But no buts. If you continue to annoy me, I'll directly sell you to Sun Lang. Let him tie you up in his cellar and make you bear his children for the rest of your life. Let's see if you still have a chance to take revenge. So, Sister Lu, will he really lock people up in his cellar? You go and ask him yourself? I don't want to. As they chatted and quarreled, the little girl slowly returned along the original path, hugging the demon sword tightly. The sword spirit sighed silently and then smiled in relief. Forget it. Why should I use this little girl? It's better to ask Sun Lang the truth as soon as possible and untie the knot in her heart. Otherwise, this little girl will really think about it for the rest of her life. In short, I'll let Sun Lang off this time. There's no need to let Xia Wei be so conflicted. I have to untie the knot between her and Sun Lang as soon as possible. Can a brother who I've never met and who might be Empress lackey be more important than me? Chapter 640. To be honest, the little goblin's psychological pressure was really great recently. She had grown up in the mountains, isolated from the world for more than 10 years. Because she was far away from human habitation, the folklore was simple and everything she experienced was very simple. It was far less complicated and difficult to solve than the chaotic world. Therefore, her life so far could be said to be carefree. The world was either black or white in her eyes, and she had never even known the taste of sorrow and trouble. But now she understood that what was sandwiched between her and Sun Lang was an indescribable and complicated trouble. Sun Lang had killed her elder brother. This was an irrefutable fact. It was a real fragment she saw in the resonance of blood when she became an adult. Sun Lang did cut off her elder brother's head, but she couldn't explain it openly and questioned Sun Lang. Probably because of fear of Sun Lang's reaction, fear of Sun Lang's power, or fear of other things she didn't realize. Even she herself couldn't tell what was going on with this complicated feeling. So it was normal for her to have a small emotional outburst today. In any case, after the messy comfort of the sword spirit, Xia Wei finally calmed down slowly. She was originally a sensible and rational girl, but she was momentarily blinded by her emotions. The little girl looked at the peach forest. She had just run around and didn't know where she had run to. She stuck out her tongue and whispered, I seem to be lost. Ji Du shook impatiently. Lost? Since we met, haven't I been showing the way? What's the use of using your brain? Turn around and go southwest. Xia Wei laughed twice. She was a little embarrassed, but she also enjoyed this kind of reprimand. Although Sister Lu's mouth was fierce, she took care of her everywhere. Even reprimanding and educating her gradually turned into nagging. She enjoyed this feeling very much. It was like having a smart and capable sister. Everything was taken care of by her, and she only needed to follow along foolishly. She followed his instructions and returned to the southwest. As she walked, she looked around curiously. I accidentally walked here. I've never been here before. The B*TCH replied, This is still the core area of the Bai clan's castle, because we don't see any high walls. Bai Yue sure knows how to enjoy life. Living alone in such a big place? Humans are really strange. They're already full, but they're still tirelessly pursuing more. Xia Wei looked around and said softly, However, perhaps it is because of this desire that can never be satisfied that humans have become so strong. It's just a little annoying. She was not whining for no reason. The previous incident at Huaichuan was caused by human greed. Sister Lu clearly had her own ideas and thoughts. So why did they still want to snatch the sword? The sword spirit said indifferently, This is very normal. Humans have never been good people. In other words, the world is like this. Whoever is greedier and more ruthless will live longer. Xiaowei shook her head. She knew that Sister Lu's worldview was very crooked. Sister, your tone is very similar to Sun Lang's. If the little fairy had said this before, the B***TCH would have been furious. She would have sharply drawn a line between her and Sun Lang. However, this time, the B***TCH did not get angry. She just said lightly, because we've all experienced it. The little fairy heard this and hesitated for a moment. Then, she said softly, Sister, what has Sun Lang experienced? He and Mr. Bai often talked about the Great Bear Mountain. Could it be? The sword spirit said calmly. From what Sun Lang said before, you should have guessed something. Sun Lang was the Grand Marshal of the Empire. In terms of reputation and military achievements, he was at least on par with Bai Yue. However, for many reasons, the Emperor had always been suspicious and wary of him. In the history of the Empire, there were many examples of people who put away the bow after the birds were done. Therefore, after the Battle of the Great Bear Mountain, Sun Lang completely disappeared and disappeared for 2 years. Her words were a bit vague. However, no matter how ignorant the little fairy was, she should have understood. She thought of Bai Yue's hysterical madness and the anger in Sun Lang's eyes. She said involuntarily, the Battle of the Great Bear Mountain was the final battle to end the Great War of Tianyuan. Could it be that the Empire did something to Sun Lang? The B***TCH said lightly, most likely so. Moreover, the Empire messed up. You can see it from Bai Yue's appearance. Xiaowei was stunned for a moment and suddenly said angrily, This is too much. How could they treat him like this? He is also a hero of Tianyuan, and he is a hero of Tianyuan who is on par with Mr. Bai. But I didn't see his name in the Book of Heroes. I don't know anything about him at all. Did the Empire erase everything about him? The sword spirit said calmly, It's normal. The cruel things that humans can do are often beyond your imagination. This is too much. Xiaowei's tone became agitated. Even tears were rolling in her eyes. A hero of Tianyuan. He is a hero, but no one knows his achievements and no one remembers his name. Seeing Xiaowei so agitated, the B***TCH was surprised. This girl's attitude was a bit strange. Why was her reaction so big? Could it be that she had unconsciously towards Sun Lang? However, the sword spirit soon understood. Xiaowei was so agitated probably because of her parents. When they chatted these days, this child never hid her identity as an orphan. However, she didn't have any resentment or dissatisfaction with her parents whom she had never met. Instead, she admired and longed for them. There was no other reason than that her parents were also heroes of Tianyuan. As a horned tiger, they fought side by side with humans on the battlefield. Not only did they fight for the rise and fall of the monster race, but they also protected the peace of this land until they died heroically. For Xiaowei, who was upright and kind, this was undoubtedly something to be proud of for the rest of her life. Although her parents couldn't be by her side, but she understood and respected them. Although she felt regret and pity, she didn't have a trace of resentment. Therefore, Xiaowei also had a very good impression of the identity of a hero of Tianyuan. Therefore, she maintained the greatest respect for Bai Yue. Therefore, when she heard about Sun Lang's experience, she felt so agitated and dissatisfied. Unfortunately, the sword spirit thought. The flames of the Great War of Tianyuan lit up the whole world. Countless heroes stepped forward to fight against the Sky Demon. Countless heroes died silently. There were millions of soldiers in the 6 armies of Tianyuan, and countless people with lofty ideals sacrificed their lives for the country. Under such a big background, everyone was so insignificant that she had never heard about Xiaowei's parents. After discussing this matter with Sun Lang, I'll find an opportunity to ask him to secretly investigate this matter. If he can find out the truth of this matter, it can probably ease the tension regarding Xiaowei's elder brother. And first of all, I have to think of a way to push this blame to the Empress concubine. In any case, Xiaoji is probably the Empress concubine's lackey. As the B***TCH was calculating in her heart, she heard Xie Wei say sadly. I didn't expect that he had such a past. Is that why he became like this? He was framed by the imperial court and betrayed by his fellow soldiers. Everything he had done and everything he had contributed was taken away. No one recognized his achievements, so the sword spirit said, no, I'm afraid that what really made him sad and desperate was not this, Xie Wei said uneasily. Could it be that he had encountered something else? Of course. I'm afraid that if you knew his real origin and past, you would probably be so sad that you would cry, silly girl. The sword spirit said slowly, I've said enough today. I can't talk about that matter anymore. It involves Sun Lang's secret. It's better if you don't know. If he wants to talk about it, you can listen. Xie Wei hesitated for a moment and nodded obediently. Oh, the two of them talked as they walked. At this moment, Xie Wei suddenly exclaimed and turned to look in a direction. There, under the cover of the flourishing trees, a corner of a black cornice was exposed. For some reason, Xie Wei's heart skipped a beat. The sword spirit was surprised and asked, What's wrong? The little fairy walked a few steps in that direction and tiptoed to look at the mysterious building. She said hesitantly, I don't know, my soul suddenly felt something. My intuition told me that I should go and have a look. The B**TCH pondered. This little girl's heart was clear, and she was intelligent. Her mental strength was incomparably strong, and her ability to read minds was frighteningly strong. The powerful mental strength of the horned tiger also gave her incomparably accurate intuition. Since she felt something and wanted to take a look, it meant that there might really be something in that strange house that Xie Wei couldn't forget. What was it? The B**TCH was also a person who was not afraid of trouble. She thought for a while after hearing Xie Wei's words. Originally, with Jidu's powerful demonic power that could rival the 7 luminaries, he could already do whatever he wanted in the Bai Clan fort. Moreover, there was a fierce person like Sun Lang above him. Even Bai Zhenming, the head of the Bai Clan, was like a grandson in front of him. Even if he caused any trouble, Sun Lang would be able to cover for him. Therefore, she could not hold back her curiosity and said, If that's the case, let's go and have a look. After all, we are now in the Bai Clan fort. Even if we do whatever we want, no one will dare to say anything. The little fairy hesitated for a moment. She felt that it was not good to break into a private house like this. However, she could not resist the B**TCH's instigation. Moreover, the inexplicable throbbing in her soul was getting stronger and stronger. She could not hold back her curiosity. She sighed and carefully approached the building with Ji-Du in her arms. At the same time, she did not forget to tell the B**TCH in her heart. Let's make a deal. If someone is guarding the building and doesn't let us in, we have to leave immediately. We can't use force or quarrel. The sword spirit said impatiently, Let's go, let's go. Maybe the golden holy sword is hidden inside. If we find the holy sword by chance, what kind of expression will Sun Lang show? Xie Wei thought for a while and could not help but laugh. She quietly approached the big house that was covered by weeds and trees like a thief. It looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. No one took care of it and no one guarded it. However, the throbbing in Xie Wei's heart was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if something inside was calling out to her. Chapter 641. Since ancient times, the more abandoned and desolate a house was, the easier it was for all kinds of stories to happen. According to classical mysticism, abandoned and uninhabited places were easy to breed demons and monsters because of the lack of human yang energy. This was actually very normal. Only in places where the terrifying upright apes did not exist would there be room for poor animals to breathe. After all, no matter how nice it sounded, humans and nature could not completely coexist in harmony. Wherever humans build a city, the nearby wild animals, large and small, basically had to get lost. Not to mention the city, the village was also the same. Once someone in the village was bitten by a wolf, the whole village would gather together to kill the wolf. They would not stop until all of them were killed. With this kind of awareness and revenge mentality, human beings constantly eliminated and exterminated all kinds of competitors and gradually jumped out of the shackles of the planet's food chain. Because humans were basically the only animals that would carry out designated killings for reasons other than predation. Maybe it was for benefits, maybe it was for revenge, maybe it was for fun, maybe it was to eliminate future troubles. When a race generally had this kind of twisted killing characteristic, they were destined to occupy the top of the food chain and even transcend it. But humans were also very fragile. Because they were smart, they had some scruples. For example, if there was no reason to do so, no normal person would easily set foot in this deserted house, even if he had a unique skill. Because they all had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, there must be demons and monsters in places where there were few people. This was basically the consensus of people in this world. Unless they had nothing better to do, who would be willing to casually experience whether it was real or fake? However, this problem was not a problem for Xiaowei at all, because she herself was a monster. Not only was she a monster, but the Jidu in her hand was also the holy sword of the demon world. Therefore, she didn't feel any pressure for this kind of big exploration of the abandoned house. Even if some demons and ghosts really jumped out, their fate could basically be imagined. After all, Xiaowei knew about Sister Lu's temper. She pushed aside the long grass in front of her and walked towards the abandoned house. Wherever she went, the flying insects and small beasts in the grass fled in panic. She was a horned tiger, a high-ranked demonic beast with a noble bloodline. She had an overwhelming power over these insects that had yet to develop intelligence. This strict division of ranks originated from the bloodline, and it was almost impossible to challenge. Stepping on a mossy stone steps, she came to the closed door. It wasn't locked. Xiaowei put his right hand on the door, and his heart inexplicably jumped. The sword spirit also sensed that something was wrong. The Kata demon sword buzzed and flashed with purple light. She cautiously said in the spiritual link, "There is something inside. Be careful, do not advance rashly." Xiaowei nodded solemnly. She retracted her right hand and slowly pulled out the demon's sword from its scabbard. The tip of Ji-Du pointed diagonally to the ground. Formless energy flew in all directions. She then stretched out her left hand and gently pushed. The door opened. At the same time, Ji-Du suddenly shone with purple light, and the bitch personality shouted, "Be careful." Sword-sharp spiritual power gushed out of the room like thousands of divine weapons being unsheathed at the same time. The chilliness of the swords turned into spiritual attacks, as if they were going to tear one's soul apart. Xiaowei snorted, but his eyes immediately became clear. She was a horned tiger. Her spiritual power was extremely strong, and she had Ji-Du to protect her. This level of spiritual attack could frighten ordinary people into idiots in an instant, but it was nothing to a strange beast with a natural spiritual sense. The little fairy was not affected by the spiritual attack. She cautiously stepped back and held her sword to protect herself. Compared to this spiritual attack, the person who released it was more worthy of vigilance. Who was inside? Before Xiaowei could take a closer look, he heard the sword spirit impatiently say, "What are you guarding for? There is no one inside." The little fairy looked carefully. The sunlight outside shone into this cold and desolate house. It was full of dust. Sure enough, there was no one inside. She awkwardly put away her sword. Then the spiritual attack just now was the sword spirit said lightly, "Go in and take a look." Xiaowei slowly walked in, and then his face instantly turned pale. As a horned tiger, her spiritual sense was extremely strong, so she was extremely sensitive to spiritual power. As soon as she stepped in, she found that something was wrong. In this cold and cheerless house, there seemed to be a violent spiritual sea. Countless terrifying and tyrannical spiritual fragments were rolling and roaring in it. It was as if there were countless angry people roaring in her ears. It was full of blood, violence, and despair. This was probably equivalent to putting on the ear of your husky who was taking a nap with the full power of a sonic boom headset that was playing the offering of love at lightning speed. It was as if the whole world had become unreal and reality had collapsed, making you doubt your life. The little fairy screamed and spread out her spiritual power to form a shield of spiritual sense. Ji-du also used his demonic power to protect her, isolating her from this tyrannical and desperate spiritual sea. Xiaowei gasped for breath, but she still had a lingering fear. She looked around with a pale face. What is this place? How could this be? The sword spirit was another personality of Lu Shujin, who shared memories with Aunt Lu. She was born as a hero of Tianyuan Empire and was more knowledgeable than the little fairy. She said lightly, "A semi-permanent imprint of spiritual sense is like an ancient battlefield that still retains a fierce, murderous aura even after hundreds of years. Just like the bloody battlefield of Tianyuan Empire is still a forbidden area for human beings 2 years after the end of the war. Because human beings have left a strong spiritual imprint in that world." The little fairy seemed to understand. "You mean this place was left by Mr. Bai?" Xiaowei said lightly, "Yes or no, you will know at a glance. Go to the wall and take a look." This house was very big, so big that it was a little abrupt. There were no rooms, just a big room alone, like a warehouse. But it was not like a warehouse, but more like a martial arts practice place, like a martial arts teaching hall. Xiaowei raised the demon sword and walked in the direction of the wall. Ji-du emitted a charming purple light, illuminating the house that had not seen sunlight for a long time. The windows and skylights had long been nailed shut. After the little fairy approached, she suddenly shouted, "I see it. Sister Lu, there are words engraved on the wall. The spiritual power comes from the words." The little demoness tone was still a little uneasy. Although the spiritual sense shield had isolated the mental impact, the little demoness could still hear the shouts and roars that contained countless negative emotions, which made her feel very uncomfortable. At this moment, she frowned as she looked at the wall. The wall was mottled and densely engraved with countless large, flamboyant words. It was like a sword had drawn on it. It was also like a blood smear. Xiaowei saw the dense words, and the most cruel, bloody battlefield seemed to appear in front of her eyes. She could even smell the strong, bloody aura. She endured the discomfort and uneasiness in her heart, and slowly read. "This line of words looks like a person's name. Huaizhou's Exenjizhong, Qingyang's Lu Wenlai, Beihe's Gahan. These are all people's names," relying on the sword light emitted by Ji-du. The little fairy looked at the surrounding walls. They were all densely packed with names, which seemed to be engraved with the sword. But in Xiaowei's eyes, every stroke seemed to be soaked in blood, making people involuntarily shudder at a glance. These people, who are they? The sword spirit seemed to be silent. Although she did not know those people, she had already guessed their origins and why they were engraved here. The little fairy walked to the side and suddenly said, "This side seems to be engraved with big words. It says, 'Right from wrong. Death is not to be regretted.'" This, she was startled, but then she saw something surprising. This side writes, "The monarch's life is like a mountain, death without regrets. Kill, 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 kill. The deceiver by Yue. This old man has lived a life of not letting the world down. Although I am ashamed, I have no regrets. The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear. He will definitely come back. That is hell. Who can kill me? Come and kill me." The messy words, the murderous words, the weak words, the self-contradictory words. Each line contained a different spiritual fragment, conveying a different thought. The confusion of the incoherent words might be the real state of mind of Mr. Bai. These words, together with the countless names, only occupied a small part of the wall. And in this huge house, the 4 walls were engraved with innumerable madness, pain, and despair. The sword spirit was still silent. The little fairy looked around blankly, as if her heart was blocked by something. She did not want to look at the wall again. Those words containing strong emotions were like dazzling lights and loud noises to her. Except for torturing her and making her feel uncomfortable, they had no effect. She was at a loss and whispered, "Sister Lu, I feel very uncomfortable and sad. I don't want to stay here. The sword spirit finally broke the silence. Then let's go. Let's pretend we never came. The little fairy took a few steps back and pressed her chest. But why did my soul let me come here? I only saw despair and sadness from the wall. On this wall, is there something else? The sword spirit said flatly, well, don't think about it. Maybe your spiritual sense detected the tyrannical spiritual fluctuations here. Hurry up and leave. You can't stay here. Xiaowei hesitated for a moment. Under the urging of the bitch personality, she left the big house full of despair and sadness. She took one last look at the wall full of blood and tears, stepped out of the threshold, and returned to the sunlight. The sword spirit said, let's go back. The little fairy whispered, okay. She closed the door. The door that kept closing gradually swallowed the sunlight from the outside world, until the weak light was extinguished without a trace. Everything returned to darkness, including the crazy words of Bai Yue on the wall, including those densely packed names, including some inconspicuous names in the corner that Xiaowei did not see. For example, Horned Tiger Xiahui, Horned Tiger Xiaming, Horned Tiger Xiaxi. Many, many horned tigers. Many, many names. Chapter 642. Therefore, after seeing the desolation and despair in the house, Xiaowei's mood became even worse. After closing the door and leaving, she walked for a long time, but she was still a little absent-minded. Occasionally, she would involuntarily look back, wanting to see the abandoned house that she cared about so much. The Jidu in her hand trembled slightly. The sword spirit said discontentedly, your own affairs are enough. In my opinion, don't meddle in old Bai's business. Everyone has their own destiny, and everyone has their own troubles. You can't even deal with your own affairs. How miserable Bai Yue is. What does it have to do with you? Xiaowei murmured, I don't know why, but I still care a lot. The bitch personality said impatiently, it's really troublesome. It's best if Bai Yue goes crazy and then dies together with Sun Lang. Then, all these things will be over. You don't have to worry about anything. The little fairy said anxiously, that won't do, because they... She was silent for a moment, and then said softly, because both Mr. Bai and Sun Lang are pitiful people. Xiaowei walked forward calmly. As he walked, he whispered, as a hero of Tianyuan, Sun Lang lost a lot because of the betrayal of the imperial court. The feeling of being abandoned by the country he fought so hard for. No wonder he became like this. As for old Mr. Bai, the complicated emotions in that room have probably tortured him for 2 whole years, even driving this legendary old marshal into a madman. He must be suffering a lot too. As the little fairy said this, a trace of disappointment flashed in her eyes. Heroes. Sun Lang and Mr. Bai are the heroes of Tianyuan with the greatest achievements. For the peace of this world and the survival of countless lives, they fought bloody battles and risked their lives. In the end, they ended up like this. They are heroes and survived such a bloody battle. Why didn't they get the reward and happy ending they deserved? The sword spirit replied, human beings are selfish and aggressive. Without external enemies, they fight among themselves. It's normal to cook the fox and the dog after the rabbit is killed. In the history books, there are many examples of this. Xiaowei sighed softly. It's too much. The bitch personality said, are you feeling indignant for Sun Lang? He killed your elder brother. The little demoness said with melancholy, I don't know. Originally, no matter how pitiful he was, it wouldn't constitute a reason to murder my brother. But now, I really don't know. Sun Lang killed my elder brother. I want to take revenge on him. And Sun Lang suffered so much. Does he want to take revenge on the emperor? Old Master Bai has suffered endless mental torture for the past 2 years. He is covered in scars. Who should he ask for an explanation? The sword spirit said calmly, this is between the two of them. Everyone can only mind their own business. Don't be sad because of other people's pain. Xiaowei nodded silently and suddenly smiled. You're right. It's just that after knowing the story of Sun Lang and seeing the sadness of Mr. Bai, I suddenly feel that my entanglement and uneasiness are a little petty. The B*TCH was stunned. What? She found that Xie Wei's mental state had suddenly changed to some extent. A smile slowly bloomed on the goblin's face. She had lived a carefree life since she was a child. She was a cheerful and happy girl. Being sentimental and being in a dilemma was not her normal self. Perhaps it was because of the shock of the words in the room, or perhaps it was because she heard the story buried in Sun Lang's heart. But after seeing the sadness of the two famous generals of Tian Yuan, she found that she had somewhat figured it out. She whispered, "I'm a little relieved. I feel that things might not be so bad." The sword spirit was a little surprised. Was this child's brain stimulated by the mental fragments of Bai Yue? She asked, "Hey, do you want me to use my demonic power to warm your brain?" Xie Wei just smiled. "I'm fine, Sister Lu." From the words on the wall, I read old Master Bai's embarrassment and sadness. I saw his despair and guilt. I thought of what Sun Lang said to old Master Bai before. Those two people must have had a very good relationship before, but they went to opposite sides for many reasons. The sword spirit was startled and then sighed. Yes, Bai Yue couldn't wait to take care of Sun Lang, as if he were his son. He even said many times in public and private that he intended to let Sun Lang take over his position. But in the end, old Master Bai still chose to obey the emperor's order. Even if the result was this mottled wall, and the end result was that he became increasingly crazy, even if he was mentally deranged, he still left a sentence on the wall that he was ashamed but had no regrets. The goblin whispered, and Sun Lang. I heard what he said before. He still intended to kill old Master Bai. His determination for revenge did not waver at all, but I could clearly feel the sigh and sadness in his heart. I'm afraid that one of the reasons he killed old Master Bai was to end old Master Bai's suffering and nightmares. He said that he wanted old Master Bai to rest in peace. The sword spirit was stunned again. After a moment of silence, she slowly said, "Maybe that's really the case." Xie Wei smiled and narrowed her eyes. She whispered, "So, I believe what you said before, Sister Lu. Sun Lang is a very, very kind person. Hey, that was in the past. The Sun Lang of the past is indeed indescribable. Even a person like me has to admit that he is a rare good person in this world. Compared to him, you, a kind little girl who has never seen the evil of human nature and the cruelty of the world, who only has wishful thinking, simply have to stand aside." The bitch personality snorted. But now he has suffered a lot, so he has finally learned to be obedient and is no longer a good person. The goblin whispered, "Is that so? Why do I feel that the current Sun Lang is also a very, very good person?" The sword spirit said in surprise. "Has your head really been stimulated? You were scared to death of him before. Now, I don't seem to be afraid." Xie Wei chuckled. "I don't know why, but I'm not very afraid of him. Maybe it's because I have a deep understanding of him." The bitch personality felt that she could no longer keep up with the little goblin's brain circuit. "You look a little strange now." The little goblin smiled again, and her footsteps became lighter. "Well, it doesn't matter if Sister Lu doesn't understand. It's just that I've figured out some things, so I'm no longer entangled." The sword spirit hesitated. "In other words, you're not going to take revenge?" "Of course not. These are two different things. In any case, he killed my brother. This is an unchangeable fact." Xie Wei whispered. "In any case, my blood-related brother was killed. As his sister, I have to seek an explanation for him. It's just that I'm no longer worried or embarrassed." "There's nothing to worry or embarrass about." The bitch personality's tone sounded like she was rolling her eyes. "Why?" The little goblin pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Because Sun Lang is actually a good person. I don't seem to need to be afraid of him killing me or doing anything else. After all, heroes are heroes. Sister Lu, even after experiencing a lot of darkness and sadness, their souls are still indomitable. I finally realized this. Sister Lu, you've been saying bad things about Sun Lang in my ear before, causing me to misunderstand him." The sword spirit said angrily, "Misunderstand my ass. He's not a good person to begin with." Yes, Xie Wei said with a smile. "But no matter what, I've figured out. I'll ask Sun Lang about my brother's matter openly. He'll definitely give me an answer. The bitch personality was surprised. Now, of course not. The little goblin whispered, my matter is actually not urgent. He and Mr. Ba must have a lot of things to do. I want to watch all of this. Someone has to remember the story of a hero. So, Xiaowei got what he wanted. She soon saw the story of the two heroes of Tianyuan. When she approached the courtyard where they lived, the little goblin heard a deafening cry coming from there. How should he put it? It was like a wailing, noisy brat who had been slapped on the butt by an impatient adult. It was a cry of shock, pain, powerlessness, and fury. Moreover, this voice was extremely familiar. It was the childish cry of an aged voice, like an old woman pretending to be a virgin. It made one's hair stand on end, and it was extremely strange. Obviously, this voice came from Mr. Bai Yue. At that time, Sun Lang said that another personality would appear. Now, it seemed that he was right. So, was it infantilization? Xiaowei sighed and then quickened his pace. The closer he got, the clearer he could hear. In addition to the extremely high decibel wailing, there were also the muffled sounds of punches hitting flesh and impatient roars. Cry my ass. Cry again. Cry again. Keep crying if you have the guts. Let's see who gets tired first. This sounded like a declaration of war of attrition by a parent who was in a Cold War with a wayward child. It usually happened in crowded shopping malls, squares, and streets. On one side, there were indifferent parents, and on the other side, there was a child squatting on the ground and crying. The reason for this was that the child did not get what he wanted. Generally speaking, there would be two different routes of development. One was that the impatient parent pretended to leave, and the panicked child immediately hugged the parent's leg and continued to cry. Finally, the child staggered and left with the adult, which represented the total failure of the crying tactic. The other route ended with the parent's compromise. Generally speaking, the latter route was easy to give birth to a 5-star naughty child. However, Sun Lang had always taken an unusual route. After Xiao Wei got closer, he heard a series of muffled sounds like beating drums. Then he saw Sun Lang pressing Bai Yue to the ground and beating him like a sandbag. His arms turned into shadows, and his legs set off bursts of wind. His moves were exquisite and magnificent, and his martial arts were broad. It was enough to make a martial arts grandmaster blush with shame. However, what was even more embarrassing was the words he said while beating. Don't cry. Cry again. If you cry again, I will continue to beat you. King cry again. King cry again. So he beat him even more happily. Bai Yue, on the other hand, was beaten by Sun Lang to the point that he didn't even have the strength to fight back. His hands flailed about, his feet kicked about, and his loud cries resounded through the sky. Xiao Wei was shocked for a moment, and a drop of cold sweat ran down his face. No wonder he said before, let's see who gets tired first. While he was shocked, the sword spirit suddenly said, Xiao Wei, when you have a child in the future, you must not let him take care of it. The little demon carefully nodded his head. With this attitude, if the child were to cry and make a fuss, he would be beaten to death. However, she quickly came back to her senses and shouted with a red face, who wants to have a child with him? As soon as these words came out, Sun Lang turned back in shock. Have we already talked about having a child? Chapter 643. As mentioned before, Sun Lang had fallen into one of the three major illusions in life. Xiao Wei's entanglement and embarrassment in the past few days were all taken by this guy as evidence of a secret love. He didn't know that the source of all this was because he killed her brother. At this time, he was still having a beautiful dream. An innocent girl fell into the river of youth because of an ignorant heart. She didn't know how to express her feelings and didn't know how to face her sweetheart. This cute little shyness, this beautiful little throbbing, really made people helpless. Sun Lang couldn't help but laugh like an idiot. His tone was unprecedentedly gentle. What happened to you just now? Are you okay? Old Bai woke up just now, so I didn't chase after him. The B*TCH shouted in the spiritual link, Hey! So disgusting. Did he take the wrong medicine? Xiao Wei was also startled by him. In the memory of the little minx, He had never heard Sun Lang speak in such a tone. This guy was usually full of vulgar words. When he opened his mouth, he would say, "You mother of asterisk cur," and when he closed his mouth, he would say, "You mother of asterisk cur," and he would often curse. What was going on today? She had goosebumps all over her body. She shuddered and took a step back. "I'm fine." However, in the eyes of Sun Lang, this kind of panic and helplessness in avoiding his eyes was just that the girl didn't know how to face him. Nothing more. It was normal. His smile became softer. "It's good that you're fine." What with his eyes? What's with his expression? Sister Lu, is this what you mean by a knife hidden in his smile? What does he want to do? So scary. So scary. Xia Wei, who just thought that Sun Lang was actually a good person, immediately overturned her previous opinion. She screamed in her heart and asked the B*TCH for help. Why is he smiling like this? Is he plotting something? The sword spirit was much calmer. Don't panic. He should be intermittently convulsing. I used to see it often. He can't be. Xia Wei was stunned. The B*TCH seemed to realize something and almost laughed out loud. She held back her laughter and said, "It's nothing. It's nothing. Don't worry, I'll protect you." The little demoness suddenly felt a chill. She said warily, "Sister Lu, you can't be plotting something, right?" The sword spirit laughed and said, "How is that possible? Whatever scheme I have, I won't use it on you. Anyway, you don't have to worry. Sun Lang won't hurt you." I was wondering why Sun Lang looked so familiar. He was probably thinking too much. Didn't this kind of thing happen every now and then in the army? However, this was also good. This idiot actually misunderstood. Let him continue to misunderstand. It was not bad for Xia Wei. After Xieji's matter was exposed, Sun Lang's attitude would not be too bad. Xia Wei was very flustered. Sister Lu's tone was somewhat meaningful, and Sun Lang's smile made her very frightened. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. This was the situation she was in. The little demoness was quick-witted. She looked at the crying Bai Yue and decisively changed the topic. Why did you hit Mr. Bai again? Didn't you say you didn't want to hit him?" When Sun Lang heard this, he immediately retracted his hand and said seriously, "Little demoness, you know that I am actually a kind and gentle person. It's only when faced with the injustice and helplessness in this world that I get angry and throw a punch. I hate violence, really, but I really can't help it." This old man suddenly returned to his youth. Not only did he return to his youth, but he also started crying inexplicably. It was so noisy. In order to restore his image in Xia Wei's heart, he immediately retracted his foot. As soon as Bai Yue, who had been trampled under his feet, was freed, he immediately rushed to the corner, curled up into a ball, hugged his legs, and stared nervously at Sun Lang. His eyes were full of tears, and his face was full of tears. He sobbed, "Bad guy, so scary, bad guy, so scary." Sun Lang glared at him. Bai Yue was like a frightened deer, shrinking his body and shivering. Xia Wei looked at Bai Yue. The all-powerful Bai Yue had become a child again. She recalled the words full of despair and madness she saw in the abandoned house. Looking at Bai Yue's old face, white hair, and frightened eyes, her heart suddenly softened. She took a few steps forward and said softly, "Don't be afraid." She was a beautiful girl. She had been very sensible since she was a child. Because of her square and old-fashioned personality, she liked to meddle in other people's business. Therefore, as time passed, she became very good at taking care of people. At this moment, she was trying to gain the trust of Bai Yue, who had returned to his youth with her gentle and beautiful face and gentle and kind voice. Generally speaking, this was very easy to succeed because human beings like beautiful things. Bai Yue looked at the girl's delicate face and gentle expression. A trace of confusion flashed in his eyes, but his initial vigilance slowly lowered. Xia Wei smiled, squatted down, stretched out her hand, and said softly, "It's okay. Come, hold my hand. We're good people and won't hurt you." Bai Yue looked at the girl's slender hand that was as soft as white jade and then looked at her face. Her gentle face was full of encouragement, so he slowly raised his hand and touched Xia Wei's fingertips. According to the general development of things, After he held the girl's hand, he would feel Xia Wei's gentleness and kindness through the soft temperature, and then slowly lower his guard. However, Sun Lang stood behind Xia Wei and looked down at Bai Yue. To be precise, he was looking down at his right hand that was about to touch Xia Wei's fingertips. "You're numb. What do you mean by shaking hands? This father hasn't even done it yet." As soon as Sun Lang thought of this, his eyes clearly revealed his meaning. "If you dare to touch me, I'll break all the bones in your body. If you dare to touch me, I'll squeeze out your brain. If you dare to touch me, I'll trample on your cock." This kind of cold gaze was quite intimidating, so Bai Yue screamed and shrank to the other side, shouting, "So scary, so scary, so scary." Xia Wei was stunned. Her hand froze in mid-air, and she didn't react. It seemed that she had suffered a big blow, and she looked back blankly. Sun Lang's eyes instantly became gentle and kind, and his tone was gentle as he added, "Bai Yue should have seen through your identity as a monster, so he's very scared. It's normal to say that you're scary. But don't worry, he's a fool and can't recognize your beautiful heart, but I can. I know you're a cute little girl." The B***TCH's uncontrollable laughter sounded through the spiritual link with Xia Wei. The little minx was awakened by this laughter. Looking at Sun Lang's strange expression, she was shocked and stammered. Sun Lang looked at the little girl's flustered appearance and suddenly wanted to pat her head. In the past 2 years, he had developed a habit of avoiding contact with women. Sometimes, avoiding physical contact with women was a conditioned reflex reaction. After all, if he touched them, there might be a problem, and if there was a problem, it would lead to trouble. So he didn't touch Xia Wei these days. Although he knew that she was the sword master of the K2 bewitching sword and was very likely to be immune to his touch, he still didn't try. First, it was because Bai Yue's matter was annoying enough that he wasn't in the mood to care about Xia Wei's matter. After all, there were priorities. At least after seeing Bai Yue, the impulse to settle the old matter was far greater than the strength to solve the problem. What happened in the Great Desolate Mountain not only tortured Bai Yue for 2 years, it was also a nightmare he didn't want to recall. It was a living hell. He and Bai Yue were the souls left behind from the Tianyuan War. Second, perhaps it was because he was looking forward to it and was panicking. It was like candy in his hand. He didn't know what it tasted like. If Xia Wei could withstand his touch, what would he do after his ecstasy? If Xia Wei couldn't withstand his touch, it meant that part of his guess was wrong. What kind of mood would he have at that time? These two reasons were intertwined. Sun Lang was too lazy to pay attention to this matter for a while and just treated Xia Wei as an ordinary passerby. But now, he suddenly wanted to pat this little girl's head. He didn't know why, and he didn't know what the reason was, but he always felt that this little girl was different from before. Xia Wei looked at Sun Lang's eyes and was naturally frightened. However, she was used to Sun Lang's violent style these days. After all, the scene of him beating Bai Yue was too explosive, so the little minx was still very afraid of Sun Lang and didn't dare to disobey him. At this moment, she didn't dare to move. She just exclaimed in her heart, "Sister Lu, what is he going to do?" The sword spirit held back his laughter and said seriously, "I think Sun Lang may have taken a fancy to you and wants to marry you." "Hey, hey, hey, hey!" Xia Wei shouted through the spiritual link. "This can't be. He killed my brother. That is to say, after the hatred of killing my brother is resolved, there will be no problem?" The little minx was going crazy. "That won't do. I don't want to marry him. This is very strange, no matter how you think about it." The B***TCH laughed and said mysteriously, "What's so strange about that? Look at those revenge stories. Many of them involve young girls sacrificing themselves to feed the tiger, staying by the enemy's side, and taking advantage of the enemy's unpreparedness to take revenge." She said earnestly, "The difference between your martial arts and Sun Lang's is too great. You won't be able to defeat him. If you want to avenge your brother, then take the initiative to seduce him. Wait until you and he are in the bridal chamber on the night of your wedding night. And when you're doing it to your heart's content, then shout and reveal your true form. He will definitely be frightened by your true form. And when he sees your horned tiger's true form, he will be even more terrified. You could take advantage of this opportunity to use your horned tiger's horn to kill him in one blow and take your revenge. Well, if you're not willing to be beeped by him, you can use your horn to beep him back. Xiaowei shouted with a red face. No. She was so agitated that she actually shouted out loud. Sun Lang was startled. Wow, I can't even touch her head? And such a big reaction? He was about to say something, but at this moment, Bai Yuwei, who had been in a state of panic, was startled by Xiaowei's shout. He seemed to be unable to bear the fear in his heart, and directly broke through the window to escape. Chapter 644. A sudden change occurred. Bai Yue broke the window and fled. Sun Lang and Xiaowei were shocked. If this brainless Bai Yue were to run out and shout, and the Bai family fort's people saw him, the consequences would be unimaginable. For a moment, Sun Lang couldn't care less about touching his head and immediately chased after him. Fortunately, his skill was profound, and his lightness skill was superb. His speed was much faster than Bai Yue, who was running with brute force. With just a few jumps, he was in front of Bai Yue. After catching up with Bai Yue, Sun Lang didn't say much. He was used to killing decisively, so he wasn't polite to him at all. After catching up, he raised his hand and punched Bai Yue right in the face, knocking him to the ground with a bang. At this time, Bai Yue's mind was already in the state of child, and he had an inexplicable natural fear of Sun Lang. After being knocked down, he didn't dare to resist. His mouth was puckered, and his eyes were filled with tears. He was ready to start crying again. Sun Lang scanned his surroundings. Fortunately, the place where Bai Yue was being held was a restricted area. Bai Zhenming had already made arrangements to forbid all the servants from entering this area. However, it would still be troublesome if Bai Yue were to burst into tears. Seeing that Bai Yue's vocal cords were about to burst out with the first howl, he casually crushed the stone tiles on the ground, picked up one of the larger pieces of gravel, and without hesitation stuffed the long, hard object into Bai Yue's mouth. Old Bai's cry immediately turned into a whimper, but this guy had copper skin and iron bones, and even his mouth was flawless. In a panic, he bit down hard, and the stone bar broke. With half of the stone bar in his mouth, he cried vaguely, "Ah, save me, save me. Who can save me?" Sun Lang was furious. He immediately reached out to grab Bai Yue's chin, intending to forcibly close his broken mouth. Although old Bai was retarded, his brute force was still there. Although Sun Lang could beat him to a pulp, it was still not easy to suppress this old idiot. After trying for a while, Bai Yue cried even louder. He also took the opportunity to crush the stone bar in his mouth with the force of the inner wall of his mouth, and then sprayed it all out through his nostrils. Asuba, what kind of stunt was this? Sun Lang was almost hit by the nasal spray. He angrily stretched out his hand and hit Bai Yue again. However, Bai Yue's invulnerability was obviously a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. Although he was beaten up and rolling on the ground, he still opened his mouth and cried loudly. No matter whether Sun Lang stuffed stones or silver ingots into his mouth, they were all the result of being crushed and sprayed out. Nothing could be compared to his broken mouth. Sun Lang became increasingly impatient as he listened to the old thing's mentally retarded cries. He looked around for something to block the bastard's mouth, but no matter if it was soft cloth or hard stone, they were all unable to stop the old thing's strong oral muscles. He was so angry that he cursed, "Old thing, you have such a strong mouth. Why don't you be a *king prostitute?" Seeing that Bai Yue was so difficult to deal with, Sun Lang suddenly had an idea. He remembered the embarrassing situation when he was pinched by Bai Yue in the Huaichuan battle and couldn't move, and the technique to break free. "It's you, canned herring." Sun Lang was so angry that he directly used a biochemical weapon of mass destruction. He raised his hand and stuffed another canned herring into the old man's mouth. "Bite. I'll *king let you bite me." The flat, oval cylindrical tin can was forced into the old man's mouth at lightning speed. As long as the old man bit hard as usual, he would inevitably taste despair. Sun Lang sneered in his heart and immediately jumped aside after stuffing the can into the canned herring. He had to be careful not to be affected. He was ready to watch Bai Yue's desperate whimper and painful vomiting, but Bai Yue didn't move. He didn't bite down and even open his mouth as wide as possible. His eyes were full of panic and uneasiness, and he said vaguely, "Take it out. Take it out." Wow, how did he know that this thing couldn't be bitten? It was obviously another personality. Had the fear of canned herring gone deep into his bone marrow? Sun Lang felt that it was very funny and interesting at first. The canned herring was a big victory, and then his eyes lit up. Marshal Sun was a military commander who was good at seizing opportunities and had a strong divergent thinking ability. He found an opportunity. Sun Lang immediately looked up at Xia Wei, who was rushing over, and shouted, "Bring me a chain." The little minx was stunned at first, and then she shouted with a red face, "Look at the situation. You're still thinking about that kind of thing." What was this guy talking about? Did she misunderstand something? Did she misunderstand him to some extent? Sun Lang didn't have time to explain. He waved his hand and said, "It's for him." Xia Wei's face was even redder. She exclaimed, Man, do men have to be locked in the cellar too?" So she must have some kind of terrible misunderstanding about him. It must be so. Sun Lang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He then said fiercely, "If you dawdle again, I'll lock you in the cellar." The little mink screamed, took 2 steps back, and said in a panic, "No, but chains, where am I going to find chains?" Sun Lang said, "Go to Mr. Bai's room and look for it. It should be in the box in the corner." His father prepared a lot of SM props. "Take 2 thin chains and 2 thick chains. By the way, take my Jingu Bang. It's the iron rod I used to draw the Vajra demon subduing circle. Hurry up." Vajra demon subduing circle? Xia Wei was stunned for a second, and then she immediately came to her senses. She turned around and ran back. It was probably the circle he drew around Mr. Bai 2 days ago after he settled him down. According to Sister Lu, there was a strong sword energy inside. If Mr. Bai wanted to break out after he woke up, he would inevitably break the fusion of the sword energy. Then Sun Lang would feel it. With the threat of being imprisoned in the cellar, her movements were much faster. She immediately found the iron rod and chain, and then turned back. At this time, Sun Lang was firmly suppressing Bai Yue, who was struggling to get away and take out the canned herring in his mouth. He also freed one hand and slapped Mr. Bai's head. Bite it. It's juicy, sweet, and nutritious. The people of Mingzhou love it. Why don't you bite it? Bite it again." Xia Wei looked at Sun Lang's mischievous smile, and her heart skipped a beat. She didn't dare to approach him. Instead, she threw the chain and iron rod from a distance. She was worried that one of them was prepared for her. However, her worry was obviously superfluous. After Sun Lang got the chain, his eyes flashed with the light of a strong rope expert. He first picked up a thin chain, estimated its length, cut off a part of the chain, and put the rest of the chain on the back of Bai Yue's head. The 2 ends of the chain were twisted to the front, and the 2 ends of the chain were twisted into sharp iron thorns. Then he gently inserted the 2 iron thorns into the canned herring in Bai Yue's mouth. After all, he was a master of swordsmanship. His actions were fast, accurate, and ruthless. There was no trace of juice or taste leaked out. So he tied it up. Canned herring. Perfect. People had instincts, and one of them was a sense of restraint and panic when one's movements were restricted. Anyway, Bai Yue was whimpering even louder at this time. Sun Lang smiled and said, "If you bite it, you will break the can, and then, wow, if you want to use your mouth and tongue to eject the can, you will affect the connection between the chain and the can. The 2 connection points are at the seal part of the can. If you flick it, it will explode, and then, wow, so don't move." Bai Yue's eyes were filled with endless fear, despair, and anger, but he did not dare to move. Sun Lang smiled proudly, and then he put Bai Yue's hands together, picked up another chain, and tied it up. After a few rounds, he used the same method to lock the other canned herring. He smiled and said, "See, to you, this chain is no different from a string. However, if you try to break it open, the can will bang, so don't move." Bai Yue's eyes were like a little girl who was being violated, full of helplessness and despair. Then it was his feet. The same method, the same formula, the same threat, the same smell, and the same terrifying herring deterrence. After tying his hands and feet, Sun Lang picked up the iron rod and put it through the chains on his hands and feet. Then he took the last chain and tied Bai Yue up from head to toe. The last can of herring was left for Dang. Oh no, for old General Bai's shiny red heart. After that, Bai Yue's hands and feet were in the air, and the iron rod went through him. He was like a fat pig that had been overturned and tied up, and 4 herring restraints were placed all over his body. Sun Lang clapped his hands and stood up. He looked at Bai Yue, who did not dare to move, and smiled proudly. Do you recognize this formation? Xia Wei, who had been watching everything from the beginning to the end, felt very complicated. She looked at the proud Sun Lang and felt a little flustered. Sun Lang's skillful tying technique just now made her think of many things. How could he be so skillful? Sun Lang, on the other hand, slowly exhaled and gave the little fairy a thumbs up with a bright smile. It's done. I was worried about what to do with the old man running around, but it's fine now. Xia Wei looked at him with a complicated expression. Mr. Bai will be sadder to see his father tied up like this. Sun Lang laughed wildly and said, That's none of my business. Let's go back. Since he is afraid of the canned herring, we have a weapon to interrogate him. As he said this, he lifted the iron rod and easily lifted Bai Yue, who was hanging on the rod with his hands and feet. Xia Wei followed behind him and whispered, What is canned herring? Sun Lang smiled and said, Do you want to try it? I still have one last can. The little fairy hesitated. It doesn't seem to be a good thing, but Sister Lu also said to let me try. Then why don't you try it? Chapter 645. Inside the room, in the corner. With a bang, the iron rod was inserted into the ground, 3 inches into the ground, and fine stone chips were sent flying. The golden radiance sword Saint Bai Yue was sitting on the ground in a dreamy posture. His mouth was stuffed with something suspicious. His hands were tied with something suspicious. His feet were also tied with something suspicious. His whole body was chained to this iron rod. It was like a crime scene. Anyone who saw this would choose to call the police. Anyone who saw this scene would probably fall into complete despair about the future of the Huda Empire. After all, these 2 people were almost the most famous soldiers in the Empire and even the world in the past 50 years. No one expected them to have this kind of relationship. Sun Lang chuckled and squatted down. Looking at Bai Yue, who was trembling in fear, Sun Lang said kindly, Later, I will take off your mouth ball, mouth jar. You're not allowed to cry or scream. I have something to ask you. If you agree, blink your eyes. If you don't agree, I will crush this thing in your mouth and replace it with a new one. Bai Yue hesitated for a moment. One fear defeated another, and he slowly blinked his eyes. Sun Lang chuckled and reached out to take off the stopper. It had to be said that this guy's body was really tyrannical. He was able to hold on for such a long time with such a thick thing stuffed into his mouth. Yet he was completely fine. He looked at Sun Lang, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. He moved back, but he was already leaning against the wall, and his hands and feet were chained with the can of herring. Even if he wanted to hide, the space he could move was very limited. He was like a little white rabbit with nowhere to hide in the face of a big bad wolf. Xia Wei looked at all this and felt very strange. She knew the story of Sun Lang, and she also saw the torture of Bai Yue from the abandoned house. She said to the sword spirit that she wanted to stay here, watch the development of the situation, and remember the stories of heroes, whether good or bad. But now it seemed she looked at the explosive and bizarre scene in front of her, feeling very strange. So, is it really good to remember this kind of thing? Just as she was feeling conflicted, Sun Lang asked, What's your name? Old Bai hesitated for a moment and said cautiously, Bai Yue. He still remembers his name? Sun Lang was curious and asked, How old are you this year? Old Master Bai looked at him timidly. 8 years old. Sun Lang glared at her. You're even more shameless than a child. How can you say something so shameless? Bai Yue shrank in fright and heard Xia Wei say, "Did Mr. Bai's memory return to when he was 8 years old?" Sun Lang rubbed his chin. "That doesn't make sense. Why does it have to be 8 years old?" He thought for a moment and asked, "Hey, Bai Zai, why are you so afraid of me? You don't know me, right?" Bai Yue felt wronged. "Because you hit me and yelled at me. You also said something I didn't understand." Sun Lang glared at him. "Wow, you have a new brain-damaged personality. Do you want to pursue the matter of hitting your son and father?" Bai Yue hesitated and shook his head. "No, just now when I was sleeping, you suddenly reached out and hit me. I didn't do anything and didn't say anything." Sun Lang suddenly felt the gaze behind him sharpen. Xia Wei said lightly, "Oh, didn't you say you didn't want to hit me?" Thereupon Sun Lang's expression changed, and he said, "Nonsense. What did I hit you? What did I say?" Therefore, Bai Yue's IQ was very low at this time, and his EQ was 0. He didn't know how to read people's expressions. After all, he was an 8-year-old child. Hearing Sun Lang wrongly accusing him, he anxiously said, "You clearly said it. I was lying there and you were squatting there and laughing. You laughed and then hit me. You also said some strange things. I remember it all." He recalled and imitated someone's tone. "Don't say that, old Bai. Although my charm is amazing, I already have people I like. Yes, I'm so handsome. Yatsura." Silence. Silence was the canned herring at this time. Sun Lang calmly raised it. Bai Yue finally understood and closed his mouth tightly, but his eyes were full of grievances and helplessness. "You clearly said it. You still don't admit it. You still bully me. Bad guy." The atmosphere became awkward for a while, but with the thickness of Sun Lang's face, this was nothing. He brushed it aside as if nothing had happened and said calmly, "Let's not talk about this for now. Let me ask you, what else do you remember?" Bai Yue looked at him resentfully. "I remember that you hit me." Sun Lang stared and said, "Not this. Why are you so vengeful? You little brat, you've been so narrow-minded since you were young. When you grow up, your horse's eyes will also be narrow-minded. Do you know that? What else do you remember? For example, what happened to your family?" Bai Yue was startled and murmured, "My family. My father. My mother. Yes, where are they? Yes, when I woke up, I couldn't see my parents. I should have shouted for them, but why didn't I want to?" Xia Wei pursed his lips and was shocked. He had never heard about old Bai's parents. He was already so old, so his parents should have been dead long ago. Even if his memory returned to when he was 8 years old, he should subconsciously be aware that his parents had passed away. The little minx sighed softly. Sun Lang was unmoved and said lightly, "It seems that your rejuvenation is quite interesting. Other than that, what impression do you have of me?" Bai Yue looked at Sun Lang again and then immediately withdrew his gaze. His eyes wandered and his tone was a little flustered. I seem to know you, but I don't remember you. I'm very afraid of you. You seem to be a very scary person. You're scarier than Father, scarier than Master Wang, scarier than Master Yin." Sun Lang murmured, "Fear." He shook his head and drew the pattern of the golden Yao sacred sword on the ground again. He asked, "Then I'll ask you again, do you know this sword?" When Bai Yue was 8 years old, the golden Yao sacred sword had nothing to do with the Bai family. Naturally, he didn't know that there was such an unstoppable weapon in the world. This was very normal, so he shook his head. Sun Lang asked a lot of questions, but these questions were not something that an 8-year-old child could answer. Moreover, Bai Yue seemed to be very afraid of him. He had almost nothing. After asking, Sun Lang went outside in silence. Because Xia Wei's heart was bursting with love, he stayed inside to comfort the frightened little wight, while Ji Du slowly floated out. The bitch asked, "What's wrong? Are you at a loss?" Sun Lang said lightly, "After all, it's only been a short time, so it's normal to have no clue for a while. But don't worry, Bai Yue's madness must have a direct connection with the Imperial Court. This time, the Imperial Court sent people. It's an opportunity." Ji Du circled a few times in the air, and the sword spirit said, "Your heart seems to be a little depressed. Is it because Bai Yue's appearance is too miserable now?" Sun Lang hesitated for a moment and nodded. "My mood is complicated, carefree, and sad. Old Bai was foolishly loyal to the Emperor and stabbed me in the back. It's very satisfying, and I'm happy that he ended up like this. But he was a hero for a lifetime, and for the selfish emperor in the so-called world, he ended up like this. It's also very ironic, and makes me hate the emperor even more. The so-called hero turned out to be a plaything in the hands of such a person. His dignity and life are not worth mentioning. The sword spirit was silent. She was hesitating whether to tell Sun Lang what she had seen and heard in the abandoned house. But those bloody words were tearing by Yue's flesh and soul. But for Sun Lang, it was also a dagger of pain and sadness. The pain engraved on the wall was both by Yue's and Sun Lang's. If he saw it, he would just be tortured again. Sun Lang was keenly aware of her silence and asked, "Do you have anything to say to me?" The bitch denied, "Nothing. I'm just a little curious. And about the little fairy, let's talk about it after Bai Yue's matter is solved." Sun Lang nodded and said, "Okay." Bai Yue woke up, but Sun Lang's plan did not make much progress, because the old general's mind had become that of an 8-year-old child. Although his mind was clear and his thoughts were normal, he was still a child after all. Bai Zhenming took the time to visit his father. Seeing his father wake up, he was both sad and happy, because his father's mind had returned to that of an 8-year-old, which really made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Therefore, although his father had woken up, it was still useless. Those martial artists who had gathered wanted an explanation for the Huichuan murder case, but his 8-year-old father could not appear to convince them, let alone solve the problem. Therefore, the crazy plan that Sun Lang had mentioned before had to continue. He wanted to play the role of Bai Yue himself. Although Bai Zhenming felt that this plan was very unreliable, the situation was so serious that he could only accept it and hope that Sun Lang would not take the opportunity to mess things up. Because Xie Wei had walked into Bai Yue's chaotic spiritual world in the abandoned house, he felt pity and respect for this old general of Tianyuan. Therefore, his attitude towards the brainless Bai Yue was very good. He usually did not go anywhere and just stayed by the old man's side to chat with him. This little fairy was really a very patient and caring person. As she said, she was good at taking care of the elderly and children. In any case, although Bai Yue was still afraid of Sun Lang, his relationship with Xie Wei was getting better day by day. Another 3 days passed in this way. Bai Yue still looked like an 8-year-old with a brainless brain. Sun Lang flipped through all the manuscripts and books that Bai Yue had left behind over the past 2 years, hoping to find some clues. However, most of them were just summaries of Bai Yue's experience in military operations and martial arts. These things might be valuable to outsiders, but to Sun Lang, they were worthless. Bai Zhenming did not stop for a moment during these 3 days. He stayed in the Bai family fort and gave out orders. He constantly sent people out on official business and called back the elites of the clan. At the same time, he wrote letters to his family's allies and relatives, recruiting people to prepare for the upcoming turmoil. These days, the wind blew all over the building, and the people of the Bai family fort also felt a trace of tension. All kinds of rumors were quietly growing. In this tense atmosphere, the martial artists who had gathered in West River finally reached a preliminary consensus and took the first step of this trip. They sent a collective visit to the Bai family fort, asking to go up the mountain and have a chat with the old sword sage Bai. West River was shaken. Chapter 646. Bai Zhenming had arrived at the deepest part of the Bai castle, while the Bai clan was busy gossiping among themselves. Sun Lang picked up the piece of paper on the table and looked at it. He clicked his tongue and said, "Sword Saint Tianxin, Arhat of the vast ocean, earthly absolute blade sect, sage ZMO. Wow, aren't these people very famous?" 3 days had passed, and Bai Zhenming looked even more haggard. He had just gone to visit his father, but his father's mind was still that of an 8-year-old's. His words and actions were no different from a child's. The Bai clan was facing a major crisis, and any carelessness could lead to their downfall. At such a critical moment, the only person he could count on was this vengeful person with ill intentions. This made him feel both frustrated and flustered. Asking a tiger for its skin, it was like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. But what could he do now? Even if it was poison, he had to drink it first. Bai Jinming nodded and said yes. Everyone on the list is a reputable figure in the martial arts world. Their martial arts are high, and their reputations are great. In the martial arts world, they are all seniors who have been famous for decades. Sun Lang sneered. Do they have such a strong sense of justice? Why are they meddling in Huai Chuan's business? Bai Jinming's face darkened. There are dozens of people on the list, but only about a third of them are disciples of the sect or the descendants of their relatives who were killed, so they came here to seek justice. As for the others, they were all invited here to help. Then they were here to make a fool of themselves. Sun Lang tossed the piece of paper aside. He did not care about the illegal gathering of these people. He was more concerned about the organization and planning behind the scenes. Who organized them? Bai Jinming lowered his head and blushed. I planted 3 groups of people and instigated at least 5 groups of people to defect, but the feedback I got was very little. The other party is very vigilant. We did not get any information about the mastermind. Useless. Sun Lang rolled his eyes at him. But nothing is the biggest gain. This means that the mastermind has a tight organization and a strong sense of anti-reconnaissance. There are not many people with this kind of ability and organization. Bai Jinming's heart skipped a beat, and he probed, Heavenly Strategies Princess. Sun Lang stretched his waist and said, Most likely. I didn't expect this woman to be so wild in the martial arts world. She stirred up trouble quite quickly. Bai Jinming's expression changed slightly. The reputation of the Tensei province was very resounding. Empress's reputation had been outstanding these years, and there were people in the government building support for her. Vaguely, she had become a popular candidate for the throne. Her womanhood was her biggest and final obstacle. With such a terrifying monster standing on the opposite side of the Bai family, Patriarch Bai felt a lot of pressure. He whispered, Then, how should we deal with it? Sun Lang ground his nails and said, Different situations call for different measures. Let me ask you, where are the idlers who came to meddle in your father's business? Bai Jinming was well aware of these matters, so he immediately replied, The date of their visit is the day after tomorrow. They've already completed their preparations and are currently gathered at a town called Jinyuan, which is located to the west of the Bai clan fort. Sun Lang stared at him and said, And then? Bai Jinming didn't understand. Then wait for those who haven't arrived to gather and go up the mountain the day after tomorrow? Sun Lang rolled his eyes and said, I'm not asking them. I'm asking you. Since you know where they are gathering, didn't you do anything? Patriarch Bai nodded and said, Don't worry, Marshal. The Bai family has been in Sichuan for more than 10 generations, and our business has improved by leaps and bounds in recent years. This place has long been our territory. I've already sent many elite people to infiltrate Jinyuan town. Now, the Bai family has eyes and ears all over the place. Nothing can escape our eyes. Sun Lang shook his head. So, you're saying that you didn't do anything after you set up a field of vision there? Bai Jinming was even more confused. He said carefully, What did I do? This lowly one is slow-witted. Marshal, please tell me. Sun Lang said resentfully, No wonder your father didn't let you join the army. If you became a general, you'd be tricked by the sky demon so much that even your mother wouldn't be able to recognize you. F***CK, this is your home field. This is your base. A group of people who want to cause trouble are gathering near your house. They have bad intentions, but you don't take the initiative to attack and show them your strength. Are you planning to let them do what they want? Bai Jinming was stunned. Show them my strength? They are all people with reputations in Jianghu. They came to the Bai family to pay a visit, and they followed the proper etiquette. They were upright and couldn't be found wrong. This is a struggle between right and wrong in Jianghu. How could you use those underhanded methods? Moreover, their martial arts are amazing. Those street scoundrels' methods of throwing lime, setting fires, and splashing dog blood are nothing to them. He was quite knowledgeable, but it was also very normal. As the largest landlord in Qinzhou, he more or less knew a little about methods, such as forcing peasants to give up their land, using usury to collect debts, and forcefully buying shops. But it was clothing. Sun Lang sighed. It's clothing. The design is really low. The layout, oh layout. You could obviously use poison, but why did you throw lime? Besides, even if you didn't use poison, isn't Sichuan your territory? Isn't your by family a tyrant in Qinzhou? Think about it. If you gave the order, which one would dare to open their doors within 100 miles? Which shop would dare to do business with those Jianghu people? Which trading company would eat the guts of a leopard and dare to provide them with supplies? Without food and water, after struggling for a few days, you can see how much strength they have left. Even if you're a coward, can't you find some prostitutes with venereal disease, dress them up, and sell them there? Not to mention that Sichuan is your territory. It's easy for you to do anything. For example, get a few 100,000 kilograms of explosives, dig a tunnel, and bury them. Who cares if they're grandmasters or heroes? They'll all explode. Sun Lang continued to ramble on with his fingers. Each scheme was more sinister than the last. These Jianghu people all consider themselves as heroes. They all want to save face and think that they're indomitable men. That's why I'm telling you, these kinds of people are the most suitable for scamming. Your Bai family is a tyrant in Sichuan. Can't you find some capable people with good acting skills? What about a poor woman who was abandoned by a hero and brought her child to find her husband? What about the leader of a certain sword sect who rode a horse and injured an old lady? Bai Jiming listened with cold sweat. He felt that this grand marshal was really crafty and sinister to the bone. These vicious schemes were focused on attacking the heart. It could definitely make people feel disgusted, but it couldn't be used. It really couldn't be used. He smiled bitterly and said, "Marshal, this is a brilliant plan, but we can't start a war with the entire martial arts world. So how can we offend them in advance? If these brilliant plans are really used, I'm afraid they'll fight us to the death." Sun Lang stared at him and said, "Are you stupid? Think about it. Your father is old and virtuous. He's worked hard and made great contributions. He fought for the country all his life. It wasn't easy for him to come home and spend his old age in peace. Suddenly, a group of idiots jumped out and said that your father went out to kill people, and he killed a lot of people. So he gathered a large group of henchmen to cause trouble in your house. More importantly, your father's reputation has been stained in his old age. Are you angry?" Bai Jiming was stunned for a moment. The bitter smile on his face deepened. "Of course I'm angry, but..." He stopped talking because he seemed to understand Sun Lang's meaning. Yes, if he wanted to deny this matter and distance himself from it, then anger and dissatisfaction were the best choices. If he handled it peacefully and carefully, it would make others think that he was guilty. Thinking of this, Bai Jiming laughed at himself. He had been so busy these 2 days that he actually forgot the most important part. "You've thought it through?" Sun Lang squinted and said, "You've been acting weird these 2 days, little Ming. Don't let anything go wrong with you." Bai Jiming's heart skipped a beat. With a serious expression, he said, "Marshal, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." Sun Lang nodded and said, "That better be the case. All right, I can't count on your Bai family anyway. Give me a map. I'm going to gene you on to take a look." Bai Jiming was shocked. "You're leaving Bai Castle?" Sun Lang stretched his body and said lazily, "I've been eating and drinking in Bai Castle for the past few days, so I'm going out to relax. That's why your intelligence work is a mess. I've been so busy with your father's matter that I didn't pay attention to it. Now, it seems that Her Highness Empress has been planning this for 5 to 6 days. If I don't go and find out what she's up to, I'm afraid there will be trouble when the time comes." Bai Jiming was a little worried. The news has already spread, and the West River is in an uproar. Countless eyes are on Bai Castle, and many cunning people are ready to make a move. "If you're not here," Sun Lang smiled, "Little Fairy has K2 in her hand, so she can be considered a fighter. Besides, she's on good terms with your father. If things don't go well, she can open the door and let him in. Don't be afraid. Your retarded father and the K2 demon sword are comparable to a 7 luminary sword saint. Even if something big happens, they can delay it until I come back." Bai Jiming wanted to say a few more words, but he saw Sun Lang stand up and shout, "Little Demoness! Little Fairy!" After shouting a few times, Xiaowei's dissatisfied response came from outside. "I heard that. Seriously, why are you always shouting and calling me a little vixen? I have a name too. Sun Lang looked at the little girl who walked in and smiled. Then, what's your name? Little Fairy was about to say her name, but she realized something and changed her words. Forget it. You can continue to call me Little Fairy. Xia Wei's name might remind Sun Lang of his brother and the Horned Tiger. Even if there was only a slight risk, he couldn't take the risk. Sun Lang looked at her. Strange. All right, I'm going out. You stay at home and take care of the child. Xia Wei nodded. Oh, where are you going? Hey, wait. Why are you making it sound so misleading? Chapter 647. In the past 3 days, the relationship between Sun Lang and Xia Wei could be considered to have become much closer. After all, Sun Lang had fallen into one of the 3 great illusions of life. He felt that this little goblin seemed to be interested in him, so naturally he had some feelings of closeness to this little girl. The beautiful girls who adore me are all the most beautiful little angels in the world. Yes, such a cute little girl with a good personality and inexperience was easy to bully and tease. Even if she was a monster, it was fine to tease her a little. With such a mentality, Sun Lang's attitude towards Xia Wei became more and more amiable. As for Xia Wei, she had figured out her elder brother's matter a few days ago. She was determined to wait for Bai Yue's matter to come to an end before asking Sun Lang openly. Since she had figured it out, her tangled mentality towards Sun Lang gradually dissipated. What's more, she had learned some of Sun Lang's past from the Sword Spirit, and then secretly imagined some of Sun Lang's mental journey. A young man who was high-spirited, successful, and famous, with the dream of loyally serving his country and the ambition to protect the common people. He made one meritorious service after another on the battlefield. He should have left his name in history and become a great minister. But because of the suspicion of the king, he lost everything, the favorability bonus of being a Tianyuan hero with his parents, the sympathy and pity for his sad past. According to the Sword Spirit, Jiang Xinjiang, who was once very kind, was suspicious. Now he was so sloppy and full of negative energy. Since there was a reason for this, the little goblin's mentality was slowly changing. For example, Sun Lang's outrageous remarks and reckless behavior had changed from dissatisfaction and anger in her heart from, how can this person be like this, to understanding and pity. This change in mentality was also reflected in her attitude towards Sun Lang. For example, if Sun Lang did something out of line, Xia Wei would shout, how can you be like this? This is not good, and blah 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 blah. Then chase after Sun Lang and earnestly educate him. But now, she would blink her big eyes and stare at Sun Lang motionlessly. Suddenly, she sighed with a sad look in her eyes. She turned her head to the side and said softly, don't be like this, okay? No matter what happens, you can't give up on yourself. Using other people's mistakes to punish yourself will only hurt yourself in the end. Sun Lang, a guy who was unmoved by force or persuasion, was actually rendered speechless. However, the saddest thing was that Sun Lang simply and crudely understood the little goblin's change in attitude, as wow, her favorability towards me is getting higher and higher. I really can't do anything about her. What will happen next? If it continues, I'll have to confess and accept the CG. If the male and female lead said something ambiguous when they parted, it usually meant that something bad was about to happen. For example, when we come back, let's go back to our hometown and get married. After finishing this job, I'll accompany you forever, and so on. These forbidden words usually contained a very terrible power. So he revealed a brilliant smile and finally said, be asterisk, this little fairy is stupid and easily deceived. You have to be careful for her. The Sword Spirit said impatiently. As expected, you can't hold back your lust. Are you finally going to extend your evil claws to her? Meddling in other people's business. Who asked you to please her? Xia Wei blushed and cried, Sister Lu, what are you talking about? Sun Lang laughed twice at Xia Wei, then turned and left. Soon, he disappeared without a trace. The little fairy looked at Sun Lang's back as he left. Her heart was beating very fast. She hurriedly said, "Sister Lu, why did he smile at me? His smile is so scary. So, does he already know?" The sword spirit smiled and said, "Know what? Know that you have a crush on him?" "What is a crush on him?" Xiaowei shouted with a red face. "I'm talking about my brother." The B*TCH impatiently said, "How many times have you asked this question? Since you have already figured it out, why are you feeling guilty? What's the difference between knowing and not knowing?" The little demoness was startled, and then her eyes gradually softened. She chuckled and said, "That's right. Even if he knows, he will pretend not to know. Then he will wait for me to ask, and then he will tell me the truth." The sword spirit snorted and said, "Oh, you know so much about him, and you still say that you don't have a crush on him." Xia Wei's face turned red again, but Sun Lang's appearance appeared in her mind. Everything about him appeared, and the fragments of what her brother saw before his death appeared. Sun Lang cut off her brother's head. His eyes were cold, as if all the killing intent in the world was contained in his eyes. "He killed my brother. No matter what, this is the truth." So the little fairy said softly, "I don't have a crush on him. No matter what, it can't be him. In my eyes, he is a former hero worthy of admiration and sympathy. I hope that he can return to the past and stand under the sun, instead of lazily soaking in the darkness like he is now. He doesn't care about anything." Her smile gradually disappeared, revealing a trace of sadness and firmness. "But one thing is another. This doesn't mean that I will easily forget my brother's hatred. He's my family. I originally had the chance to see him, but he died in the hands of others. I saw his appearance when he died, and I saw the person who killed him. How can I pretend not to know?" The sword spirit was silent for a moment and said, "Is that so? But Xiaowei, the things in this world are tangled up in a mess. Some things are not so easy to distinguish. If you want to use reason to control emotions, I'm afraid it will be very difficult." Xiaowei smiled and said, "I don't think so. As long as I have the heart, it shouldn't be too difficult." "Naive little girl, you think it's not difficult because you haven't experienced real difficulties, right? But that's good. I hope you will never have to experience it." The sword spirit sighed in his heart and said, "Okay, go back. We'll talk about the future later." Xiaowei nodded and turned around. Suddenly, there was an inexplicable throbbing in her heart again. She clenched the demon's sword in her hand and said softly, "Sister Lu, I don't know why, but I feel a little uneasy. I think of that abandoned house again. I keep feeling that I overlooked something at that time. I keep feeling that something hasn't happened yet." The sword spirit said lightly, "You've been saying this for the past 2 days, but I don't see anything happening. I think you're just scared. After all, you're just a girl from the countryside who hasn't seen that kind of situation." The little fairy's eyebrows congealed with a trace of melancholy. She smiled bitterly and said, "I hope so. By Clan Fort, Righteous Hall, where the elders discussed matters." Bai Jinming sat in a chair, pinched his eyebrows, looked at the empty room, and sighed silently. The elders of the clan had all left. Although he was the head of the Bai clan, he was not a dictator. He did not have the prestige of his father, so he could not completely suppress the brothers and uncles of the collateral branches. Usually, the various branches were in endless disputes because of interests. Now that the matter of Huaichuan could no longer be suppressed, a group of martial artists was waiting in Jinyuan. Naturally, the clan was in an uproar. As the head of the Bai clan, he had to face countless questions and even questions. He had to appease the people and suppress the chaos. Now that there were more members of the clan in the list of his enemies, it meant that the burden on his shoulders had become heavier. Yes, the people's hearts were scattered. In the face of this kind of change, the people were not thinking about fighting side by side against the enemy, but protecting their own interests by Jinming's side again, irritation and uneasiness coexisting in his heart. But suddenly, his lazy eyes narrowed slightly. Unknowingly, a letter appeared on the ground. Chapter 648. This was the Upright Morality Hall, the most important meeting place of the Bai family. It would only be opened when a major event related to the fate of the family happened. Those who were qualified to participate in the meeting were the elders with high prestige and real power in the family. Such an important place would naturally be heavily guarded. 3 times a day, there would be people who would come to clean it. The servants in charge of cleaning were loyal and nimble. They would clean up the important meeting place of the Bai family as quickly as possible and then leave as quickly as possible. All of this was under the surveillance of the family's law enforcers. This was the rule of the Bai family. Nothing could be accomplished without rules. Aristocratic families needed rules. But here, in the core meeting area of the family, a letter appeared on the ground after a big meeting had just ended. The letter lay quietly on the ground. Under the contrast of the clean floor tiles, the yellow envelope was dazzling. At least in Bai Jinming's eyes, the color was dazzling. He didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, he narrowed his eyes. As the head of the #1 family in Qin Prefecture, he didn't want to act rashly. What was written in the letter wasn't important. What was important was who put it here. Bai Jinming closed his eyes. The scene of the quarrel and meeting that just happened here appeared in his mind. 3rd uncle's aggressiveness, 5th uncle's mediation, 4th cousin's sarcasm. Some people were making a big fuss, some people were silent, and all of them hid a trace of fear in their eyes. Even more people were asking about their father. They were afraid. Everyone's faces appeared in his mind. These damned vermin, relying on the Bai family's protection, desperately trying to gain benefits for themselves. They did not know how to restrain themselves and were unscrupulous, constantly eroding the towering tree that was the Bai family. Now that a major event was about to happen, they were all panicking. Their hearts were scattered, and everyone was thinking about their own interests. He opened his eyes, and a wisp of cold, murderous intent came out. There is no doubt that this letter appeared after the meeting. Someone must have deliberately thrown it on the ground when leaving. That was to say, the person who left this letter must be an elder who held great power in the family. Then why did he leave this letter on such an occasion and in such a way that could be easily exposed? If it was an elder in the family, there were many ways to send letters. So, was it a demonstration? Was it a reminder? Is he trying to tell me that the Bai clan fort is on the verge of collapse and that many things are out of my control? Then who is it? Bai Jinming pondered for a moment, then waved his hand. A gust of wind rose from the ground, and the letter slowly floated into his hand. Holding the thin envelope, Bai Jinming wiped the sweat off his forehead and slowly exhaled. With his martial arts and aptitude, it was still a bit difficult for him to do such a thing. He looked at the letter in his hand, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. He sighed and said, "Father, I really don't have the aptitude to practice martial arts. If I only had half of your cultivation, Uncle and the others wouldn't have dared to be so presumptuous today." After a sigh, he slowly opened the letter in his hand and took out the white letter. After reading 2 lines, his expression changed slightly. The words in the letter were straightforward, and there were no hypocritical greetings or pleasantries. He went straight to the point. When the various sects and clans sent their invitations to the Bai clan castle, I'm sure your expression would be terrible. But when you went to your father's shovel sword garden, the worry on your face would lessen by half. Your useless relatives would think that you gained courage and peace of mind from your father, but I know that it was someone else who gave you the courage. Therefore, this letter should be in your hands. Don't be afraid. He must have left by now. I know what he wants to do, and he can only do it himself. After all, no matter how powerful he is only one person. He can't be in 2 places at once, right? Bai Jinming suddenly tightened his grip on the letter, and he almost crushed the thin letter. He subconsciously raised his head and looked around vigilantly. His eyes were like those of a mad tiger. At this moment, Sun Lang was holding the token, the map, and the token that Bai Jinming gave him. First, he swaggered to the private stable of the Bai clan fort. Then he picked the best horse in the clean, spotless stable. It was even more luxurious than the place where people lived. It was said that this horse was Bai Jinming's favorite, and it was one of the best horses in the Qin province. Sun Lang kicked aside the chief steward who came forward to stop him with a smile. Riding on the horse, he smiled and said, "You can go complain to Bai Jinming. I'm going to ride this Ration's reserve horse away. Ration's reserve horse? If he sold this horse, he would be able to sell a few warehouses worth of rations. After that, Sun Lang galloped through the Clan fort, all the way until he left through the main gate of the Clan fort, leaving a trail of dust behind him. Along the way, many people saw him leave. When the chief steward finally found Bai Junming, the head of the Clan had just finished a meeting with the elders and returned to the study room, where he usually dealt with family affairs. Bai Junming was surprisingly calm despite the stuttering and terrified narration. "It's not your fault," he said, waving his hand after a moment of silence. "You're not to blame," he said. "You were beaten up by him? Go to the accounts room and withdraw 50 taels of silver. Don't talk too much about this." The chief steward in charge of the horse farm heaved a sigh of relief. There were many horse farms under the name of the Clan fort, and the one he was in charge of was the smallest of them all. However, it was probably the most valuable because he and his horse farm specialized in serving the members of the Clan. Of course, it was a lucrative job. He didn't care about the 50 taels of silver as consolation money at all. However, the most important thing was the attitude of the head of the Clan. The chief steward kowtowed and carefully excused himself. After the chief steward's footsteps slowly faded away, Bai Junming called out, "Brother Qing." The steward walked out of the room next to him and said respectfully, "Yes, sir." Bai Junming was silent for a moment and said nonchalantly, "Just now, Chief Steward Yang offended Mr. Sunday. He's an important guest of our Clan, and we can't treat him lightly. Make a trip to the Clan fort and Jinyuan town personally and instruct all the inns, hotels, brothels, and tea houses under our name to be extra careful. If they see Mr. Sun, they'll do their best to serve him." He paused for a moment and said with the same tone, "I can't rest assured about those boorish people. Brother Qing, you'll be in charge. If Mr. Sun has any orders, everyone must go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. If he needs supplies or manpower, even if the Clan fort sends them directly, we must satisfy all of his requests." The steward didn't ask any more questions and nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll do it right away. Mr. Sun will be the most important guest of West River." Bai Junming said, "I've always trusted Brother Qing. It's just that Mr. Sun's identity is special. Remember to report to me on time. Also, don't go overboard. We're not spying on him." The steward lowered his head and said in a calm tone. He didn't ask any unnecessary questions and didn't say anything unnecessary. He only said, "Yes, sir. I'll take my leave now." After this brother of his who had grown up with him and was both his servant and friend left, Bai Junming slowly lowered his head and closed the book in his hand. Under the book was an open letter. Bai Junming stared at the letter with a ferocious and cold expression, like a hungry wolf at the end of its rope. At this moment, Sun Lang had already left the Clan fort on his handsome horse. He suddenly realized that he hadn't acted alone for a long time. After the accident in Mingzhou, he held Empress hostage and headed west. After a fight with Bai Yue at Huaichuan, Empress took the opportunity to escape. However, a madman and a demon joined the team, and they even brought along a demon sword. These days, he'd been arguing with Bai Yue every day, then with the little fairy, and then with the *TCH. It never stopped. At this moment, a man and a horse galloped down a mountain. The wind blew against his face. The air in Sichuan was cool and dry, making him feel good for a moment. And when he thought of the purpose of going down the mountain this time, his mood became even better. The martial arts world. Previously, he had planned to experience the true taste of the martial arts world. Unfortunately, the people in Huaichuan were all talk and no action. Moreover, the people he came into contact with were a bunch of lowly people. He didn't seem to have met any of the truly powerful grandmasters. This time it was great. Thinking about the name list provided by Bai Junming, Sword Master Tianxin, Zine, the spiritual master, he knew that they were at least golden rare monsters. After all, a man must have dreams and style. Tormenting people left and right, tormenting rare monsters gave him a greater sense of accomplishment. The more he thought about it, the happier he became. Then, he subconsciously touched his pocket. Suddenly, his expression changed. A mechanical voice sounded in his ears. You have insufficient biochemical weapons. F***CK. There's only one box of canned herring left. He had no choice. He left in a hurry this time and didn't have much on him. When he fought with Old Bai and Huichuan, he let him use a can. When he set up the golden herring formation, he used another 4 cans. Now, he only had 1 can left. This 1 can was not a small amount, but it was enough to play a lot of tricks. For example, it could let a so-called peerless master completely understand the true meaning of life and the truth of the world. It could also let a large group of people soak in the rain of hell and enjoy the carnival of demons. However, there was only 1 can. It was only enough for 1 biochemical attack. Many of the more high-end games could not be played. Then, should I think of other ideas, Sun Lang rubbed his chin and smiled like Moses Roy. However, before that, there were still some more important things to do. Sun Lang straightened his back and looked ahead. At this time, he had already galloped for a while. Not far ahead, there was an inn. On the top floor of the inn, there was a white flag with a sharp sword drawn on it. Bai Jinming said that anything with such a symbol was the property of the Bai family. Then let's go. Sun Lang smiled and squeezed the horse's belly. The horse let out a neigh and sped up toward the inn. Chapter 649. It was still Bai Jinming's study. This was the Bai clan's patriarch's favorite place to stay. Usually, he would deal with the Bai clan's affairs here. This place was named the Lofty Residence by him. Behind this small house was a mountain garden, with rockery, towering, and jagged rocks of grotesque shapes. The Bai family was known as the Sword Sage's family. Their ancestor, Bai Yue, was the gold radiant Sword Sage. Therefore, the Bai family naturally worshipped the metal element, loved the color white, loved martial arts, and liked collecting weapons. Naturally, they also liked rocks. Therefore, the Bai family's castle was built on a mountain, and there were many rockery in the castle. If it wasn't for the fact that the name was too ugly and weird, the Bai family's castle would have been called the Bai family's cave. The head of the Bai family, Bai Jinming, liked to play with strange rocks. This was known throughout Qinzhou. The reason why he named this small house the Lofty Residence was very simple. He wanted to show off. However, there was a saying for showing off. For example, the Lofty Residence was taken from the meaning of unmoving. It was very straightforward. It meant that he, Bai Jinming, was here, unmoving, overseeing all directions, strategizing from 1,000 miles away. Now that the sky was getting dark, he had been strategizing for 6 to 8 hours without moving. The situation was very bad. The Bai family was involved in the Huichuan incident, and the heroes who came to demand an explanation would visit the mountain the day after tomorrow. It could be said that the crisis was imminent. However, the undercurrents in the castle were turbulent, and the people were panicking. His father was crazy. Sun Lang was up to no good, and the big sects outside were aggressive, and the shadow of Tensei province was faintly discernible. This was the so-called internal and external troubles. The family was walking on a tightrope, and the slightest mistake could lead to eternal damnation. All the heavy burden was on Bai Jinming's shoulders. Therefore, he should make friends with the elders of the family, stabilize the people's hearts, and contact his old and new allies to strengthen his momentum and gather all the forces he could to get through this dangerous situation safely. This was obviously his top priority as the head of the family. However, the funny thing was that most of his energy was not on this at the moment. His focus was so strange that it was almost bizarre. Perhaps the elders of the Bai family would never have imagined that this gloomy and shrewd patriarch, who was known for his shrewdness, would actually put all his energy on one person at this moment. Bai Jinming was paying attention to one person's every movement, whether it was traveling, eating, drinking, or traveling. He wanted to know everything, no matter how big or small. Every half an hour, this was already the 8th time the steward had reported to him. The Bai clan had used a few precious messenger eagles that they had purchased from the Sianwu nation at a high price to deliver the message with the highest efficiency. The target of the message was only one person. After finishing this ordinary report, the housekeeper respectfully placed the report in his hands on Bai Jinming's desk, then stood to the side, waiting for the master's inquiry and orders. He felt that the patriarch's attitude was a bit unusual, but he would never ask what he shouldn't ask. After a while, the steward with the steward's head of the family. The steward was the steward of the family. The steward replied, "Yes, he was riding your Qing Feng horse. The horseshoe was specially made, so it was easy to recognize the marks on the road. I sent the family's equestrian experts to track him, and the conclusion is that Mr. Sun has been traveling on the official road. Except for resting along the way, he didn't make any suspicious stops on the way, and he didn't go to any side roads." After questioning the passers-by, their statements also supported this conclusion. Bai Jinming remained calm, but his heart was beating like a drum. He felt that his soul was suspended in the air, and there was a blazing abyss under his feet. He felt that his whole body was burning, and there was a strange sound in his ears. He knew that this was all an illusion, an instinctive reaction of his body, a trick of his soul to deceive himself. The reason was very simple, because he was guilty. Yes, guilty. When people do something daring, they will feel guilty. For example, when they are young, they peek at a woman taking a bath, or when they are young, they will hit on a woman on the road, or they will skip a private tutor's class, or they will lie to their father. Before preparing to do something that they think is wrong and risky, people will naturally have a guilty reaction. Bai Jinming was feeling guilty at this time. That was why he was almost crazily inquiring about Sun Lang. He had to confirm every move that Sun Lang made. He had to confirm that Sun Lang was far away from the Bai family fort, and that Sun Lang would not suddenly rush back. He was even suspicious, wondering who wrote that fatal letter. He wondered if Sun Lang had predicted all of this. He even wondered if Sun Lang deliberately threw out that letter to set him up. But no matter what, the person who wrote this letter was a cunning fellow. He was sharp enough to see through people's hearts, and also had the calmness of a brilliant hunter. The other party just calmly set up the net, and then unhurriedly reeled it in. The purpose of every step was very clear, the timing was very appropriate, and the words of every word directly knocked into his heart. Bai Jinming silently waved his hand. The housekeeper understood, bowed, and left. Bai Jinming was left alone in the middle of the room. At this time, the sky was dark and the night wind was blowing. Bai Jinming sat in the study room, looking around the brightly lit room. For a moment, a sense of loneliness and fear rose in his heart. He thought of the letter, thought of the contents of the letter, and his heart could not help but tremble. Even his hands were shaking. The writer was like a rich gambler who was at ease because he had an inexhaustible supply of chips, and because his opponent could not refuse the wager he was placing. Bai Jinming vaguely saw a figure standing in front of the gambling table, looking at him with a calm smile, and then spread out his hands. "It's your turn. Do you want to bet?" Bai Jinming's breathing slowly quickened. He thought of the firm assertion in the letter. Sun Lang will kill your father. There is no doubt about it. There were also those simple and straightforward words and reasonable persuasion. There were no hypocritical promises, only ironclad facts and an irresistible proposal. The Bai family is finished. I mean, it is rotten to the core. The foundation of the Bai family has been corroded by the group of incompetent relatives. Even if you give up your father's life and your own dignity and tie the survival and glory of the whole family to the chariot of a madman, it will not change the fact that the Bai family is rotten. He may be able to give you temporary peace, but he will be too lazy to help you revive your family. Even if there is a new master, the Bai family has no future. Father's life and the future of the family must be difficult for you to choose. But if there's a way to have the best of both worlds, I don't know if you're willing to try it. You only need to pay a little, insignificant price. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. I have full confidence in a plan. This is an open conspiracy. You will understand after you read it. I will keep my promise. You don't need to do too much, really. Do you want to know? Then follow my instructions and do one thing. Something insignificant, something that will not affect anything. Even if he knows about it, it will be fine. Bai Jinming slowly stood up, and took a deep breath. He turned his head and looked at the mechanical device in the corner. It was a creation from the country of acute metal. It was called a mechanical dial. It was a very convenient thing to use for timekeeping. The time had come. He thought about the content of the letter and what that person wanted him to do. It was really a small matter. And just like what the letter said, it's on the way. Yes, it was time for dinner. It was time to eat. He had to pay respects to his father 3 times a day, especially since his father was crazy. He should take care of him and serve him soup and rice. The footsteps outside the door were getting closer and closer. Another steward in charge of the daily life carefully carried a big box of food. He held a lantern and came to the front of the towering house. He said softly, "Master, tonight's dinner has been brought." Benjamin clenched his fists. The madness in his eyes gradually disappeared. He said calmly, "I know. I will send it to my father now." The steward bowed even lower. He did not forget to flatter him. "Master and elder ancestor are very close. You are filial and kind. I admire you very much." Benjamin did not respond. He took the box of food and the lantern from the steward and walked to the shovel sword garden in the depths of the Bai castle alone. The elder ancestor had been living in seclusion for the past 2 years. He did not see outsiders. In the entire Bai family, only the patriarch had the right to enter and leave the place at will. Yes, it's on the way. The security around the shovel sword garden was much stronger. After Bai Jinming entered the garden, he quickly arrived at the place where his father lived. No, it should be the place where he was imprisoned. That was right. His father, the gold radiant sword saint, was imprisoned in his own home like a dog by an outsider. That was his father. This was a great humiliation that no one in the world who still had a father-son relationship could endure, but he had to endure it. And he had to endure it. When he thought of this fact, the flames in his heart seemed to explode. In the past few days, he had been treated like a grandson. He had been mocked and ridiculed. He had to watch his father being punched and kicked. The life of his family was in the hands of one person. Therefore, he had to bow and bend his knees. Therefore, he had to tuck his tail between his legs and behave himself. Even a clay figurine would have some anger. Let alone him, the son of a sword saint, the patriarch of the Bai family. He was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. He was destined to be a noble person. How could he suffer such a great humiliation? Every word in that letter seemed to have drilled into his heart. If there is a chance, I don't know if your remaining courage will be enough. Courage. His father's residence was right in front of him. He could faintly hear a woman's bell-like laughter. It was the monster that Sun Lang had brought. She seemed to be telling a story. Hearing Xia Wei's voice, a sharp light flashed in by Jinming's eyes. Perhaps after reading that letter, he already had an answer in his heart. He reached out and knocked on the door. Chapter 650. Bai Jinming knocked on the door. Someone inside smiled and said, "Mr. Bai is here." Brisk footsteps sounded, and the door was quickly opened, revealing a pretty face that was both happy and angry at the same time. Even though Bai Jinming was already past the age where he knew how to admire Xiao AI and had already become an experienced veteran, at this moment, even he had to admit that the girl in front of him had an extraordinary charm. Good figure and good looks, these were the standard features of a beauty. But other than that, this girl had an innocent temperament, like a flower without a speck of dust. She wore her hair in a long braid that reached her waist. It was a hairstyle that an ordinary peasant girl would wear, but on her body, it was so perfect. He thought back to the 2 days when he came to visit his father. This girl had always been by his father's side. That gentle and beautiful smile even stunned and moved him. Bai Jinming knew that the reason this girl was willing to talk to his father was definitely not because of the Bai family's power or wealth. It was because her eyes were very pure, as if the Bai Yue in her eyes was not some gold radiant sword saint, but just an ordinary, pitiful old man. Humans always yearn for things they could not get, so such a pure and beautiful girl had a fatal attraction to Bai Jinming, a carnivore who rolled around in the darkness and schemes all day long. He felt that if he was 10 years younger, he would definitely do anything to get this girl, even if she was a demon, but now. Not to mention that he was old and tired of playing, He did not care much about this kind of thing. Not to mention that the crisis facing the Bai family did not allow him to think too much. Just one point. A certain person's face appeared in his mind. The image of this person was very clear in his mind. He could even imagine what he looked like when he spoke. Little Ming, are you tired of living? Or is your whole family itching for it? Yes, if it was that person, it would not be strange for him to say such vulgar words. Oomph. Thinking of that person, Bai Zhenming felt a wave of irritation in his heart, as well as an indescribable nervousness and panic. At this moment, a fragrant wind blew in front of him. He came back to his senses and saw the little fairy waving her hand in front of him. What are you thinking about? The old man is waiting for you. Bai Zhenming hurriedly restrained his emotions as he recalled the additional warning in the letter. Remember to control your emotions. Don't think too much in front of that little vixen. He revealed an apologetic smile and adjusted his emotions. For an old fox like him who did not show his emotions on his face, it was not difficult for him to focus and deceive others. After he adjusted his state of mind, he said gently, "Recently, there have been many troublesome matters in the Bai clan. I suddenly thought of something. Sorry for my rudeness." Xiaowei stepped aside and smiled. "It doesn't matter. My teachers are often in a daze. They're always thinking about this and that. Maybe you adults have a lot of worries." Bai Zhenming nodded his head politely and walked inside. He wasn't familiar with this little demoness, so it was better for him to follow the instructions in the letter carefully. Bai Zhenming's voice came from inside. "Is father well? Your son is here to pay his respects." Then there was Bai Yue's slightly embarrassed response. His mind was now similar to that of a child. Suddenly, he had such a big son. Anyone would feel restrained and awkward. Oh, except for Sun Lang. This guy could get into the state as quickly as possible and beat his son up. Xiaowei was just about to close the door when Ji Du, which was hanging from his waist, vibrated. The B*TCH personality said through the spiritual link, "There's something wrong with Bai Zhenming's eyes. Use your mind-reading skill to see what he's thinking." The little fairy sighed. "It's very impolite. Besides, there's nothing wrong. Isn't it normal for men to have lustful eyes? And there's no desire or malice in his eyes, so it's okay." The sword spirit laughed. "Wow, you've really become an experienced and sharp-eyed woman in the past 2 months. Are you going to fish for men next?" "Not at all." While bickering with a B*TCH in his heart, Xiaowei went to the next room. It was carefully cleaned up. It was very clean and tidy. There was a soft bed and there was a fragrant smell in the air. It should be the fragrance of the expensive wood of the furniture. In short, Bai Yue's living environment was much better. But his personal situation hadn't improved in the slightest. First, his memory hadn't recovered and his mind was still that of a 7 or 8-year-old. Second, he was still being physically detained by the so-called herring golden lock formation. At this time, Bai Yue was sitting on the bed, holding a steel pipe. His whole body was wrapped in chains, and there were several small yellow cans hanging from them. He looked very funny, but Xiaowei couldn't laugh because he could feel the sadness in Bai Zhenming's heart. After all, seeing his father being manipulated like this while he couldn't do anything, he would definitely feel sad, lost, and upset. Even now, although Sun Lang had gone out to handle some matters, he still didn't dare to untie his father's chains. Even if it was only for a short while, he still didn't dare to. At this time, the sword spirit said, "I have to give you a heads up. If he talks to you about unlocking Bai Yue's chains, you must not agree to it. You can't agree to it no matter what." The little fairy said in a bad mood, "I know, Sister Lu. You said it several times. I'm not stupid. I've already remembered it," B*TCH said. "Oh, you little girls still dare to be impatient? Who do you think I'm nagging for? If Bai Yue doesn't have a chains and goes crazy, he can beat you into a meat patty with one punch." Okay, I know Sister Lu loves me." Xiaowei was like coaxing a child. "In short, I will definitely not agree. You can rest assured." She entered the room, and Bai Zhenming had already moved the table. He took out the food box one by one and introduced tonight's meal to his father. 4 colored stir-fried dishes, 4 colored cold dishes, porridge, steamed buns, soup, and pastries. These were all ordinary dishes, but after all, they were made by the famous chef of the Bai family. Compared to the cooking of ordinary people, the taste was really different. The tempting aroma of the dishes drifted in the air. The color of each food was so attractive. The so-called color, smell, and taste were all perfect. Everything was done to the extreme. Even though Xia Wei had been living a good life in the Bai family for several days, seeing the delicious food in front of him still made him feel hungry. Bai Yue looked at the little fairy, showed a silly smile, and said, "Come, come, let's eat together." Xia Wei smiled. "I'd better go back and eat. You father and son rarely see each other. Take this opportunity to have a good talk. I'll come and play with you later." It had been like this for the past few days. Every time it was mealtime, Bai Jinming would bring food boxes to his old father, while the little minx would return to the place where she and Sun Lang lived. There was a whole team of top-notch food and beverage service to cater to her and Sun Lang's extravagant appetites. The little minx was thin-skinned and would eat whatever was available. Sun Lang, on the other hand, was shameless. He put on a posture of wanting to eat the Bai family until they went bankrupt, eating whatever was most expensive. The reason why they ate separately was to give the father and son of the Bai family a private space to meet. Secondly, Sun Lang was too lazy to eat with Bai Yue. In his words, "My nerves are not thick enough to eat while looking at canned herring." Xia Wei felt that Sun Lang was lonely eating alone, so he decided to eat with him. But now, Sun Lang went down the mountain alone. No one knew what he was doing. Therefore, the little fairy was all alone. At this moment, Bai Jinming suddenly said, "Mr. Sun has gone down the mountain. I'm afraid he won't come back tonight. There are many dishes here, and the two of us can't eat. Why don't you stay and eat with us? Father will also be very happy." Xia Wei heard this, and his heart moved, but he still refused. "That's not very good. Mr. Bai must have a lot to say to your father." Bai Jinming smiled. "There's nothing that can't be said to others. It's okay. What I told my father is all about the past. I hope it can make him remember the past as soon as possible." At the mention of this matter, his eyes dimmed a little. This was his true feelings. Now that the Bai family had undergone drastic changes, the enemy was in front of them, and the family was in danger of being destroyed. All the burdens were on his shoulders. He hoped that his omnipotent father could help him share some of the pressure, but his father was really old. Not only could he no longer shelter him from the wind and rain, but he also needed his son to protect him. Even 2 years ago, his father was still the world-renowned Gold Radiant Sword Sage. He had spent decades fighting against the extraterrestrial demons. He had witnessed the victory of the war with his own eyes and participated in the final battle against the extraterrestrial demons. In the end, he had succeeded and retired. His name had spread far and wide. What kind of hero was he? But no one would have thought that in just 2 years, he would become like this. The little fairy was soft-hearted. When she saw the tears in Bai Jinming's eyes, her attitude softened. Moreover, this was not a difficult request. "In that case, I'll disturb you." Bai Jinming smiled gratefully, while Bai Yue cheered and urged, "Quick, quick, give her a pair of chopsticks." Bai Jinming complied and took out a bowl and chopsticks from the food box. Xia Wei hurriedly took it and moved a stool to sit down. Bai Yue's hands and feet were locked, so it was difficult for him to move. He relied on Bai Jinming to feed him. The dignified patriarch of the Bai family didn't show the slightest impatience. His movements were very gentle, just like an ordinary son taking care of his old father. Xia Wei saw this and whispered, "You have a very good relationship with your father." Bai Jinming smiled. He couldn't help but think of the flattery from before. He had also praised him for his deep relationship with his father, but Xia Wei's praise was 100 times better than the former. "What a good girl. What a pity, what a pity. Although I don't know what the mystery of that inexplicable request is, I don't know why that mysterious person wants me to do this, but since it's related to her, it means that this innocent little fairy is also being targeted. It's a pity. You're a good girl. It's a pity that I can only do this for my father and the Bai family." He recalled the contents of the letter in his mind and tried to figure out the process. Then, he said, "Miss, you're overpraising me. Chapter 651. Bai Zhiming's expression was very calm. It was as if he was doing something very ordinary. In fact, it was indeed very ordinary. Although he was the head of the Bai family and the local tyrant of Sichuan, he was still a human and had human emotions. As a son, it was only natural for him to be filial to his father. Anyway, that was how he explained it to Xiaowei. This explanation also hid some things. For example, if Bai Yue was not the gold radiant sword sage, not an elder of 3 dynasties, not a hero of Tianyuan who had brought countless glory and benefits to the Bai family, and not a pillar of the Bai family, would Bai Zhenming be as filial and patient as he was now? There would probably never be an answer to this question, because in this world there was no if. The little demoness had lacked the love and care of her parents since she was young. Although she had kind teachers and gentle and considerate friends to accompany her, and had beautiful memories of growing up, she still yearned for kinship. Seeing Bai Zhenming's pure kindness and filial piety, she felt very touched. Very good, very good. This was also a very normal thing. Therefore, she looked at Bai Zhenming with even more kindness. The head of the Bai family did not bat an eyelid, and cleverly changed the topic back to his old father. So, feeding my father and serving him is nothing strange. Speaking of which, I actually don't want to do this kind of thing. I don't want to see the omnipotent and majestic father in my memory fall to the point where he needs me to serve him. I want to see him live a long and healthy life with a big appetite. Bai Yue looked at him blankly, only confusion and embarrassment on his face. With his current IQ and EQ, he did not understand these things. The little fairy understood and said softly, I also hope that Mr. Bai can get better soon. Although he is carefree and happy now, he is not the real him. Bai Zhenming nodded and said, Thank you for your kind words. Day after day, there is still a long way to go. One day, my father will get better. He then went to feed his father porridge and picked up some food. As he did so, he asked, Father, did you remember anything today? Yesterday, you told me about the juniors in the family. You were Zilin and Xiaofu. Their names were all personally chosen by you. Bai Yue shook his head blankly. He still couldn't remember anything. Bai Zhenming didn't get angry and said softly, That was 10 or 20 years ago. It's normal that father can't remember it. Then let's talk about what happened a few years ago. Bai Yue glanced at Xiaowei and saw the encouraging smile on the little vixen's face, so he nodded. You can tell me, but I don't know if I can remember it. Bai Zhenming smiled and said, Father, you don't have to feel burdened. Just treat it as a story. Since you seem to remember Mr. Sun, then let's start with his name. You are the gold radiant sword saint, one of the marshals of the Imperium. You are a famous general in the army. You have a lot of old friends under your command. Many heroes of the Heaven's origin sector who fought side by side with you on bloody battlefields. Perhaps the stories of those people can awaken some of your memories. Then he began to talk about the names of those people, their deeds, their famous achievements, and interesting things that people didn't know about. According to him, these were all things that Bai Yue had told him in private. Now, he was returning these memories that he had inherited from his old father to his father. It was like a reincarnation. However, Bai Yue was still confused. The names of those who had gone through fire and water with him didn't stir up any waves in his heart. However, Xiaowei listened with great interest. She heard many familiar names that she had read in the Book of Heroes of the Heaven's origin sector. The official epic of heroes was far less vivid and interesting than the private narration of the people involved. The little vixen was very interested in the War of Heaven's origin. To be precise, she was very interested in the heroes of the Heaven's origin sector because her parents had died heroically in this war. This made her sad and proud. Therefore, she had a positive view of the War of Heaven's origin and a friendly attitude towards all the heroes. That was why she had a very complicated impression of Sun Lang and Bai Yue. So, it was really good. She listened to the stories of these people, no matter if they were familiar or unfamiliar names. These people were all heroes who had fought for the survival of their race and their country in that war. Some of them had achieved success and made their ancestors proud. Some of them had left their lives on the battlefield to pave the way for victory. Although those heroes had died, many people still remembered their names, whether it was in the history of the heroes, the wordless monument, the remains of the battlefield, the rumors spread by people, or just like today, when the father and son whispered under the lamp. In the end, there were people who remembered them, remembered their names, remembered their deeds, and remembered the heroes in the past. As the little vixen listened carefully, she couldn't help but think, what about my parents? Would father and mother be like these heroes? Would their names be mentioned by different people at different times and places? Would they be engraved in their memories? Then her expression changed, and she looked at Bai Zhiming, or did he know? Mr. White said that everything he knew was told to him by old Mr. White. Old Mr. White recognized my horn and my identity as a horned tiger, which meant that he also recognized other horned tigers. He might have mentioned something about my parents. Bai Zhiming noticed the little vixen's eyes. She seemed to want to say something, as if she was expecting something, but she was hesitating. Here it comes. He felt a chill in his heart and said to himself. He thought of the last request in the letter. It was just asking him to do a small thing and casually say a few words. It was very puzzling. But since he had already made up his mind, and this request was indeed very inconspicuous and there were no consequences, he decided to do it. It was just a matter of convenience. So he stopped talking and said to Xia Wei, "Miss, what's wrong? Are you tired? Can you go back and rest first?" After he finished speaking, he seemed to realize that he had said something wrong. He smiled bitterly and said, "Of course, I didn't mean to send you away. And please don't worry, I know my limits. Although Mr. Sun is not here now, he will be back tomorrow or the day after. Even if I want to do something, I won't dare." Xia Wei was startled at first. Then she quickly waved her hand and said, No, nothing. I believe you. Besides, I'm not tired." Bai Zhiming hesitated for a moment before asking, "Forgive this Bai for being presumptuous, but is there anything that this young lady needs help with? Is there anything this young lady can help with?" The little vixen was in a dilemma. She didn't know if she should ask and how to ask. If she asked about the horned tiger, would it alert Bai Zhiming? If he casually told Sun Lang about this matter, wouldn't it cause more trouble? Alas, if he knew that she was a horned tiger, he would definitely think of her brother. But her curiosity about her parents obviously overpowered her hesitation. She thought for a while and decided to change the topic. "I heard from my teachers that the Tianyuan War was not only the history of human heroes, but also the participation of the demon race, right? Here it comes." Bai Zhiming looked thoughtful and lowered his head slightly, so that Xia Wei couldn't see his eyes. His heartbeat slowly sped up, but soon calmed down. His spirit was tense like a string. He controlled his emotions according to the instructions in the letter and pretended to think for a moment. He raised his head and said in an affirmative tone, "Yes, my father mentioned to me that in the Tianyuan battlefield, the demon race and human race fought side by side." After he finished speaking, he found that the little girl's eyes lit up. Xia Wei leaned forward and said in a slightly excited tone, "Did Mr. Bai mention the specific names of the heroes of the demon race?" Very well. Why was she interested in this? Was it because she was also a demon? So she wanted to know if there were any seniors of her race among the heroes of the Tianyuan battlefield? Was that why she wanted to know so much? A cloud of doubt appeared in Bai Zhiming's heart. Then he felt that this might not be the case. The small task that represented sincerity in the letter was obviously directed at this little demon. Although he didn't know the other party's intentions, he understood that there must be a deeper meaning. Things were not that simple. Then he calmly controlled his emotions and eliminated distracting thoughts. He showed an apologetic expression and said, "I'm sorry. I have to think about this. You know, my father usually only interacts with famous generals in the army, and there may be demon heroes in the army who join, but due to various reasons, they usually don't get a lot of military power, so my father doesn't often mention them," Xia Wei said softly. "This is normal. I know the humans are very afraid of or reject demons. How can they let demons command human army?" Bai Zhiming smiled apologetically and said while thinking, "Yes, I remember that my father should have mentioned something about the heroes of the demon race. When the Tianyuan battlefield was in chaos, the Sky Demon was aggressive. They wanted to exterminate all living things in the world, and even the demon race was no exception. Therefore, it was necessary for humans and demons to fight side by side. The knowledgeable people on both sides started a war and tried to join forces. The little demon nodded vigorously and opened her eyes wide, like the most well-behaved student. Bai Junming recalled, "My father said that the demon race is a magical creature that is different from humans. Regarding the origin of the demon race, the world can't agree, but everyone agrees that the demon race has a magical power based on the bloodline. This power is innate, unlike humans who have to be tempered and cultivated to become strong." Xiaowei nodded and said, "Yes." Just like herself, she was born with the ability to read minds and spiritual power. Then, Bai Junming said, "My father said that different demons have different innate powers that are suitable for different fields. For example, demons with amazing strength, invulnerable, and huge bodies are suitable for charging and breaking through enemy lines. For example, demons with invisible and ghostly appearances are suitable for spying. In addition, there are other demons with extremely rare talents that can take on more critical positions, such as..." He furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment. Then, he slowly said, "Father once said that there was a monster with an upright personality and mystical powers. That was why he was appointed as a military judge." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiaowei directly stood up and said in a trembling voice, "What?" Chapter 652. Upright Character. Magical Power. Military Judge. Xiaowei stood up. The horned tiger could distinguish between good and evil, and the horned tiger could hear people's thoughts. Her teachers often said that the horned tiger was a beast that could distinguish between good and evil, so it was regarded as the embodiment of justice and justice by the ancients. To be able to become a military judge with the identity of a monster, the identity of this monster was most likely. She looked at Bai Junming excitedly and asked, "What is the name of that monster? Which clan does he belong to?" She couldn't help but be excited when it came to the deeds and legends of her parents' clan. After all, she lost her parents when she was young, but she was proud of their heroic identity. As a daughter, how could she not know the legends and stories of her father's generation? Unfortunately, she didn't get the answer she wanted from Bai Junming. The head of the Bai family showed an awkward expression. Looking at his father, he bitterly smiled and said, "Young lady, please forgive me. I am not very interested in monsters. Back then, my father only mentioned it a few times, and I didn't take it to heart. I only roughly knew that he had a good relationship with my father, and my father usually respected him." So, he sighed and shook his head. "So, the only one who can answer your question is my father. After all, what I said today is just a retelling of my father's chatter." Xiaowei subconsciously looked at Bai Yue. The gold radiance grand sword saint of the past met her gaze and shivered. His eyes were blank, without any ripples. That's right. He couldn't even remember his brothers who had gone through fire and water with him. How could he remember a military judge? Bai Yue stammered, "I'm sorry." Xiaowei was stunned for a moment and shook her head. She looked at Bai Junming again, seemingly hesitating about something. But in the end, she sighed and slowly sat on the chair, showing a lonely look, and whispered, "It's okay." Anyone would be able to see the disappointment and regret in her heart with a single glance, not to mention a sly old fox like Bai Junming. Obviously, she was very concerned about the military judge. Could he be her relative? Why did that person ask me to say this? She only mentioned this matter, but didn't tell her more. Instead, she pushed all the blame onto her father. Could it be that this matter had something to do with her father? However, his father was already in such a state. Even if this little demoness tried her best, she wouldn't be able to get anything out of him. Bai Junming's heart was filled with suspicions. He forcefully suppressed the chaotic emotions in his heart. For a moment, his heart actually felt empty. Was it some kind of huge sense of loss and panic? He had already fulfilled the sincerity that the letter asked him to do. In other words, he had made his decision and taken the first step. Then what would happen next? He suddenly felt a burst of irritation and fear. He was used to being high and mighty and could decide the life and death of countless people in Westchuan with a single word. But at this moment, he felt like a chess piece being manipulated on a chessboard. He did not know what his fate would be or what would happen in the next moment. He could only pin all his hopes of survival on the chess player's skills and mood. He had no choice. His eyes were filled with pity as he glanced at the dazed Xiaowei. Of course, you're the same. Just now, you also fell on the chessboard. Perhaps this move that he couldn't understand would evolve into a fatal killing move 2 days later. He suddenly lost the mood to continue talking. After a moment of silence, he stood up, tidied up the food box, and said softly, "Father, the Bai family will be busy these 2 days. Your son won't accompany you any longer." Bai Yue glanced at Xia Wei, who was still in a daze, and asked in surprise, "You're leaving now?" Bai Zhiming smiled. His smile was somewhat apologetic, but his tone was firm. "Father, please forgive me. There is indeed an important matter at hand. Once this matter is over, your son will accompany you more. Let us, father and son, talk about the matters of the past one by one. Bit by bit, one day you will remember everything." Bai Yue looked at his son. He only had memories of when he was 7 or 8 years old, so he couldn't adapt to suddenly having such an old son. But at this moment, looking at the tears in his father's eyes and the haze under his forced smile, Bai Yue seemed to feel his father's worry, concern, and complicated feelings in an instant. His heart seemed to be touched. He finally felt an emotional resonance based on his bloodline, and he also read some changes in Bai Zhiming's eyes. The relationship between father and son seemed to have undergone a metamorphosis to some extent. In the past, the gold radiant sword saint Bai Yue's name had spread throughout the world, and he was an unparalleled hero. He single-handedly supported the awe-inspiring prestige of the Bai family and supported the supreme glory of the sword saint's family. He was the umbrella that protected everyone. Even Bai Zhenming, who had already become the patriarch of the Bai family, had a smooth-sailing life under his father's awe-inspiring prestige. He had always been like this since he was a child. But now, the situation was different. Bai Yue saw this change in his son's eyes. His father was mentally ill, and there were internal and external troubles. The gold radiant sword saint's power and influence could no longer be relied on. Bai Zhenming suddenly realized that he had become the most powerful man in the family. When his father could no longer protect him and help him, and instead needed his protection, he finally understood the meaning and responsibility of being a son. Every man hoped that this day would not come, but this day would eventually come. He would not hesitate to pay any price. He saw this determination in his son's eyes. Suddenly, Bai Yue felt a sharp pain in his heart. He instinctively felt an unprecedented sense of panic, and a sense of helplessness took over his heart. This feeling was so familiar. The feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of being unable to do anything. Bai Zhenming had already packed up the food boxes. He looked at his father and said gently, "Actually, it doesn't matter what you become. As long as you are here, I will be at ease." Then, he bid farewell to Xia Wei. The little minx still seemed to have a lot on her mind. She was a little absent-minded and reluctantly responded to Bai Zhenming. She sent the head of the Bai family away and watched his back disappear at the end of the path. The sword spirit said faintly in her heart, "The way he looked at you before was a little strange. Why don't you see what he is thinking?" Xia Wei forced a smile and closed the door. She found that her hands could not help but tremble. She whispered, "It's here again. Sister Lu, these 2 days when I heard about my parents, I always felt an unprecedented sense of fear. It was the same when old Master Bai recognized my identity. It was the same when Master Bai mentioned it just now. I am inexplicably afraid." The B*TCH was silent. She did not know what to say. Xia Wei was stunned for a while. She tidied up her mood and turned around to say goodbye to Bai Yue. She was not in the mood to tell stories tonight. Bai Yue was also sitting on the bed in a daze. Seeing the little minx's eyes looking at him, Bai Yue's expression was a little sad, a little confused, and a little apologetic. He slowly said, "I'm sorry, I can't remember anything." Xia Wei shook her head. "It's not your fault. You can't do anything about it. But, but I don't want to be unable to remember. Bai Yue's tone was blank. I don't remember anything. I don't know when I had such a big son. I heard him say that I am more than 70 years old, but I don't remember anything in these 70 years. My memory only stops at that afternoon. I sneaked out after practicing martial arts and asked Aoyang to go find a bird's nest. He rarely spoke his mind like this before, so Xiewei listened quietly. Bai Yue glanced at the little minx and said sadly, I don't know anything. I don't remember anything. After I opened my eyes, there was a terrible person beside me. He beat me up without any explanation. I don't remember him, but I am very afraid of him. He must have done something bad to me. Bai Jinming is also very afraid of him. He must have wanted to do something bad to us, Xiewei sighed softly. But who could be blamed for this? Bai Yue also sighed. His voice trembled. Although I don't remember anything now, I don't want to be unable to remember. I saw the look in his eyes just now. Only now do I really believe that he is my son. I don't know how to put it. I just feel that if I can't remember, something bad will definitely happen. The little minx bit her lips. She seemed to be hesitating. After a long time, she stared at Bai Yue and slowly said, Do you really want to remember? Bai Yue looked up at her and then nodded without hesitation. Xiewei spoke very slowly. She seemed to be considering her words, or perhaps she was also hesitating. The little minx slowly said, Your memory should be hidden in your heart. Although you can't remember it usually, if you receive a certain stimulation, your memory will recover to a certain extent. Previously, you recognized Sun Lang and remembered some things with Sun Lang. You also remembered some other things, for example, my dagger, my identity, and the matter of the horned tiger. Bai Yue nodded, as if he understood. The little minx's voice was very soft, as if she was floating in the sky. It seemed that even she didn't know what she was talking about. Do you mind? Let me see your memory. Bai Jinming had already returned to the courtyard where he lived. His face was ashen, because he saw a letter on the bed in his bedroom. It was an ordinary yellow envelope, exactly the same as the one he received before. The yellow was dazzling, as if it was silently mocking him. He said in a Sunran tone, Who came today? His wife's face was pale. She whispered, The aunts and sisters-in-law of each branch, as well as some juniors, all came. They all came to inquire about the news, but Bai Jinming suddenly sighed. Things had already reached this point. Even if he continued to investigate, there was no meaning. In any case, he had already made his decision. He held the letter in his hand and said in an unquestionable tone, This matter, just pretend it never happened. You don't need to care about it anymore. The next step, what should he do? Chapter 653. Jinyuan Town. It was about 40 miles away from the Bai family fort. It was neither too far nor too close. The town was not small either, so it was just right. The Huaichuan's Avengers Alliance had used this place as their outpost and had gathered here illegally. They had already issued a formal challenge to the Bai family fort in 2 days' time. It could be said that they had come with ill intentions. Sun Lang came at the right time. Now that all the heroes had arrived, it was even more spectacular than the time in the Huaichuan Divine Artifact Instance Dungeon. Everyone was ready to do something big. The nature of today's event was very different from the one in Huaichuan. In the Huaichuan Divine Artifact Instance Dungeon, everyone was a potential competitor. On the surface, they were all smiling, but in their hearts, they hoped that they would be the lucky one to obtain the Divine Artifact Instance Dungeon. But this time, things were different. The Gold Radiant Sword Saint had killed so many heroes in order to obtain a Divine Artifact Instance Dungeon. What kind of behavior was this? This was the behavior of the demon cult. Those hundreds of lives could not be forgotten. As the saying goes, if a prince breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people. Even if you're a hero of Tianyuan, even if the Bai family fort is powerful, you still have to give the heroes of Jianghu an explanation. Otherwise, if you can't reason with them, you will have to use your sword to negotiate. Therefore, everyone came here for the so-called justice and justice. They naturally occupied the moral high ground. The enemy was the incomparably powerful Sword Saint's family. Everyone had to be fearless and brave to fight. Naturally, there was a sense of common hatred for the enemy. Therefore, the atmosphere in Jinyuan town was unexpectedly good. Sun Lang entered Jinyuan town and received a lot of smiles along the way. Previously, he deliberately changed into a Jianghu person's appearance in a restaurant of the Bai family fort. He even put on a wig and dressed up as a young swordsman. He originally planned to cosplay as Li Xiaoyao, but then he thought that the guy's ending would not be good. Wuxia games from the old era loved to play this kind of game. It was fine in the past, but after more than 20 years, there was still no progress. It seemed that other than playing sad and sadistic games, they did not know how to make games. Oh no, they have learned how to play with emotions now. After expressing his greetings to Yao Xiansun through the crystal wall to the other world, Sun Lang left the flashy horse at the inn. Carrying a metal sword, he slowly walked into Jinyuan town. There were two things in Jianghu. What? Fine wine and beautiful women? No, it was bragging and fighting. First, there was the appearance of the Huai Chuan godly sword. Then, there was the murder of the Gold Radiance Sword Saint. In less than a month, these two events had shaken the martial world. Jianghu would definitely have a lot of topics to talk about. If, a few months later, you mentioned these two events to your new friends, and if you could calmly say, these two events, I happened to be there at the right time, everyone would definitely think highly of you. In fact, even if you were just there to watch the fun, you could still brag about it. After all, they would not know. Along the way, Sun Lang heard a lot of bragging. Speaking of which, this guy was also good at acting. Along the way, he had made a lot of friends and obtained a lot of reliable and unreliable news. Everyone had gathered here to ask the Bai family for an explanation for the Huaichuan murder case. Therefore, the most discussed topic was naturally what happened that day. Therefore, Sun Lang heard many versions of the Huaichuan murder case. There were 2 points of interest in this matter. First, how could they be sure that it was Bai Yue? Second, Bai Yue was a famous general of Tianyuan Empire, the Gold Radiant Sword Saint, and one of the few great masters in the world. How could he casually kill people? There were several pieces of evidence for the former. First, there were pictures drawn by the survivors. Many people who had seen Bai Yue said that he was old Master Bai. Second, when the old bastard Bai went berserk and slaughtered the innocent people, no one could stop him. At the critical moment, a hero from the sky beat the crazy murderer back. Everyone heard him call out Bai Yue's name. Obviously, this logic was not perfect, but this matter was not simple at all. What a hero from the heavens, the hero who descended from the sky, touched his chin. He suddenly had a bold idea. When I beat up Bai Yue, I didn't think too much. Many people must have seen me. So, at this moment, I will appear in Jinyuan town as the mysterious master who beat Bai Yue back. Then, I will raise my arms and call for people to support me as the leader of this Avengers Alliance. It sounded very exciting. He could not help but imagine Bai Zhenming's expression when he led a large group of Jianghu people to the Bai family castle and shouted, "Down with the tiger in the army." The more Sun Lang thought about it, the brighter his eyes became. He found a place to rest and began to think about the possibility of this plan. Now that things had escalated to such a stage where the Jianghu people gathered to attack the Bai family castle, there must be someone behind this. Needless to say, the mastermind must be the emperor's family. They had a lot of resources at their disposal, and they were also very evil. Who knew what kind of sinister scheme they were plotting? It was easy to dodge a spear in the open, but hard to defend against a stab in the dark. Therefore, the best way to solve the conspiracy was to become a part of it. Didn't you want to organize this illegal gathering? Didn't you want to gather the Jianghu people to cause trouble at the Bai family castle? Then I might as well be the leader of this Avengers Alliance. Look, my martial arts skills are so high, and I was the one who defeated Bai Yue. Whether it is in terms of martial arts, contribution, or participation, I am the undisputed number one. Therefore, if I become the leader of this Avengers Alliance, you will definitely have to follow the rules. Everything will be done according to the basic rules, and there will be no sense of an imperial decision at all. This is called democracy, isn't it? After I become the leader of this Avengers Alliance, I will contact Bai Zhenming and have both sides verify their statements. When the time comes, I will put on a show and come up with a good plan. Who knows, I might be able to fool them without any mishaps. It was a good idea, and it was very feasible. However, it was also very risky. The mastermind behind this matter would definitely not let it go so easily. They would definitely have countermeasures in place. He did not want to fall into their trap and make things worse. Sun Lang was calculating in his mind when he suddenly heard a shout, "Everyone, go to the center of the town. Hero Yang and the others have something to say." When he was chatting with the Jianghu people, Sun Lang had also filled them in with some martial arts knowledge. This Hero Yang was the Sword Saint Tianxin. His name was Yang Tiandu, and he was a typical Jianghu person. He was the idol of countless Jianghu girls, and also Sun Lang's enemy. Therefore, after hearing about Hero Yang's dissolute deeds, Sun Lang had already made up his mind. He would definitely find a time to beat him up, put a gunny sack over his head, and put him on the ground in an alley. After hearing this shout, most of the Jianghu people who were drinking and bragging in the various restaurants and tea houses in the town put down their cups, paid their bills, and left. Only a few arrogant people remained where they were, as if they were disdainful of such matters. Sun Lang listened to the discussions of these Jianghu people, and he had a rough idea of what was going on. According to Bai Zhenming's report, the Sword Saint Tianxin, Yang Tiandu, was an elder of this Avengers Alliance. He had been the most active when he gathered everyone up the mountain to cause trouble. Now that he was going to give an important speech, it was likely that he was going to organize a meeting to set up a plan. For example, he was going to choose a leader or something. Sun Lang didn't have any good impression of this dissolute Hero Yang. He hated this kind of person who went around messing around. He didn't have Hero Sun's chastity, so he would go and cause trouble and see if there were any opportunities. Thus, he straightened his body and placed the iron sword in his hand on his shoulder. Just like an ordinary young swordsman, he looked left and right with excitement and yearning for the major events of Jianghu. He could not hide his excitement. This scoundrel's acting was really good. He followed the crowd for a while. It was bustling with activity, and it took him a long time to reach the center of the town. There was a large plaza there, with dozens of bonfires burning. A large stage had been set up in the center. A few Jianghu people, wearing the same uniform, were maintaining order. They seemed to be from the same sect, and they seemed to be of high status. The Jianghu people who had gathered were in a mess. They stood in 3 circles on the inside and outside of the plaza, chattering in all directions. It was completely the rhythm of an illegal gathering. Sun Lang shook his head. What a good opportunity. Bai Zhenming, that idiot, with the current situation, it was like thousands of illegal armed forces had gathered to cause trouble. He just needed to find a prefectural general and lead the troops to surround them. First, he would capture the leaders and handcuff them to the radiators for 2 days. Then, he would be able to gain the upper hand and stir up the situation. After waiting patiently for a while, seeing that almost everyone had arrived, a lukewarm voice sounded in everyone's ears amidst the clamor. "Heroes, this humble one greets you." Sun Lang dug his ears. His inner strength was not bad. The crowd was silent for a moment, and then the noise rang out again. "Greetings, Hero Yang. Good kung fu. Brother Yang, since we parted in Jingyang, how have you been?" Unknowingly, a tall figure in a fluttering robe had appeared on the stage in the center. He smiled and cupped his hands in salute. He looked like a scoundrel with a knife hidden in his smile. Sun Lang had already made a conclusion about Hero Yang in his heart. Then, he heard Hero Yang say, "We are all Jianghu people, so I won't waste time on pleasantries. Heroes, you have all traveled thousands of miles to come here. Naturally, it is because of an earth-shattering event that happened a few days ago. To tell you the truth, after I heard about it, I rushed here from Shangzhou on a fast horse. I didn't sleep for 3 days and 3 nights because this matter is really too much." These last few words were infused with internal energy and were filled with anger. It exploded in everyone's ears, and everyone could feel his anger. For a moment, the crowd in the plaza was furious. Most people's emotions were easily stirred up. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.